Chapter 789. Although Su Chan was a coquettish and beautiful little fox, she rarely took the initiative in matters between men and women. Li Yundong looked at the little girl in his arms with some surprise. He scratched the tip of her nose with his finger and said with a smile, "You little girl, you're a little scheming, aren't you? You coaxed them all out and then you came back. Not bad, not bad." Su Chan only wanted to be with Li Yundong every minute and every second. It would be best if she could not let go of him. But the little girl also knew that her master was a person who wanted to do great things, so she could not be a burden to him. She looked at him and said pitifully, "But I used to be with you every day, but now I often can't see you. Sometimes I can only see you for a few days and then you disappear again after a few words. I feel sad." Li Yundong's words made Su Chan look at Su Chan, and she said pitifully, "But I used to be with you every day, but now I can't see you." No matter how reasonable and broad-minded the little girl was, seeing that there were more and more beautiful women around Li Yundong, although Li Yundong was a gentleman and could still control himself, it was absolutely impossible for her not to have any thoughts in her heart. There was no such stupid woman in the world, and even if there was, it would definitely not be Su Chan. However, after all, many of them were Li Yundong's fellow disciples. Ziyuan was Li Yundong's confidant who was both a teacher and a friend. She also took care of Su Chan a lot. Zhou Qin was Li Yundong's friend, classmate and eldest disciple. Lin Miao was also Li Yundong's disciple. Even Feng Na, Ching Cheng, and the others were also Li Yundong's friends and helpers in his business. These people were all beautiful women. It was true that Li Yundong was fated to have a peach blossom. Sometimes just looking at such a room full of beautiful women made Su Chan feel a headache for Li Yundong. It was fine if there were more and more women, but the time she spent with Li Yundong was getting shorter and shorter, which made Su Chan really depressed. Therefore the little girl came up with such a drastic idea. Early in the morning she secretly encouraged Ziyuan with the saying that women do not sacrifice themselves to the kitchen stove, and then played a back thrust. Li Yundong saw that the little girl was speaking pitifully, but the corners of her eyes were full of slyness and pride. He couldn't help laughing and said, "You little girl, do you feel very proud after deceiving so many people?" The pitiful expression on Su Chan's face suddenly disappeared and was replaced by a triumphant expression. She said with a smile, "It's fine if it's others, but it's really rare to be able to deceive Sister Ziyuan." Li Yundong laughed and said, "Really? From what I see, Ziyuan is giving in to you. How could she not see through your little scheme? Didn't you see her smiling without saying a word?" Although this girl was a bit stubborn, she wasn't a stubborn person. Besides, wasn't it just women not sacrificing to the kitchen stove? Wouldn't it be fine if she didn't participate in the ceremony? Why did he have to run? "I'm catering to you." Su Chan opened her mouth. She thought for a moment and felt that what Li Yundong had said was reasonable, but she was still a little unconvinced. She said, "Really? When Sister Ziyuan comes back, I'll ask her." Li Yundong said with a smile, "Don't ask. With her personality, even if she sees through it, she won't point it out, let alone say it. Moreover, there must be others who have seen through your thoughts. Do you believe me?" Su Chan snorted and said, "I don't believe it. No one else is so smart." As soon as she finished speaking, she heard the sound of the door outside. After a while, there was the sound of hurried footsteps coming upstairs. A figure quickly passed by Li Yundong's door, but as soon as it passed, the person suddenly poked his head out of the door and said with a surprised expression, "Su Chan, why are you back?" As soon as Su Chan saw this person, she became angry. "Ling Yu, why are you back?" A meaningful smile flashed across Ling Yu's eyes. She giggled and said, "I forgot to take my wallet, so I came back to get it." As she said this, she winked at Su Chan as if she didn't know what to say. Seeing that Ling Yu had ruined her plan, Su Chan was so angry that she wanted to bite this damned girl. She puffed up her cheeks angrily and ground her gums. She gritted her teeth and said, "That be asterisk starred, she has never used a wallet. She puts all her money directly in her pocket. Does she think I don't know?" While she was losing her temper in a low voice, she saw Ling Yu sweep past the door like a gust of wind. After that, she leaned back and poked her beautiful head out of the door. She said with a smile, "Su Chan, have fun with the leader. I'll go out first." As she said this, she retracted her head, but as soon as she retracted it, she quickly poked it out again and said with a sneaky smile, "Don't worry, I won't tell anyone else." This last sentence made Su Chan so angry that she stamped her feet. Li Yundong, who was beside her, looked at her with an expression that said, "Look, what did I just say?" He had a strange expression on his face. After stamping her feet for a while, Su Chan finally lowered her head dejectedly. Her small mouth was pouting high, and her face was full of resentment. Her eyes were full of unconcealable loss and disappointment. Li Yundong couldn't bear to see her like this, so he hugged the little girl and said softly with a smile, "Well, silly girl, don't worry about what they think. As long as you're happy." The little girl shook her head bitterly and said in a low voice, "No, I can't let them gossip behind my back. I'd better go shopping with them." Li Yundong smiled and said, "Don't be silly. They can probably guess that you will sneak back halfway. Besides, you are my real girlfriend. What can they gossip about?" The little girl still just shook her head as if her little self-esteem had been hurt, and her face was sad. Seeing that he couldn't persuade her, Li Yundong had to settle for the next best thing. He said, "Well, you go. I'll go with you, okay?" The little girl wanted to stay alone with Li Yundong. If they went together, there would be no chance for them to talk intimately. However, the little girl didn't say what she was thinking. She forced a smile and said, "Okay, let's go together." The little girl didn't say anything, but Li Yundong could see it. He looked into her eyes and suddenly laughed. "Forget it, I won't go. If you're not happy, I'll go." Su Chan quickly raised her head and said, "No, no." She was about to argue, but she heard Li Yundong whisper in her ear, "Silly girl, you sneaked into my room at night." When Su Chan heard this, she was stunned for a moment, but then she smiled and nodded her head like a chick pecking rice. She smiled without a nose or eyes, stretched out her little finger and giggled. "Don't go back on your word." Li Yundong laughed and crooked his finger at the little girl, saying, "Okay, I won't go back on my word." Only then did the little girl completely change from worry to joy. She bounced out of the door after Ling Yu's figure. The group of beautiful women wandered around outside for almost a day. After Li Yundong worshipped the kitchen god at home, they had a sumptuous dinner together. After dinner, everyone went back to their own rooms to cultivate. The little girl waited impatiently until it was dark. When most of the people went to bed, she carefully and quietly left the door like a thief. She came to Li Yundong's room and gently pushed the door open, only to see that it was unlocked. Obviously, Li Yundong was waiting for her. She was delighted and took a look inside. Sure enough, she saw Li Yundong sitting cross-legged on the bed, looking at her with a smile. Li Yundong's gaze made Su Chan feel a little hot all over, and her cheeks turned red. However, she quickly got into the room and locked the door. Immediately, she climbed onto the bed and threw herself into Li Yundong's arms like a swallow flying into the forest. She raised her jade-like face, pouted her rosy pink lips and whispered, "Let's have a kiss first." Li Yundong held Su Chan in his arms, lowered his head fiercely, and kissed the little girl's red lips hard. The sound of his kiss startled Su Chan. The little girl looked around with a guilty look, as if she was afraid that the people in the next room could hear them. Seeing her like this, Li Yundong immediately laughed and said, "What are you doing? Are you afraid that others will know that you're being intimate with your man?" Su Chan's face turned red and she giggled. "You're so shameless. You're not my man yet." Li Yundong wrapped his arms around Su Chan's slender waist and kissed her snow-white neck intimately. "Then tonight I'll make you my woman and you'll make me your man," he said. "What do you say?" Su Chan's body went soft when she heard this, and her lower abdomen felt hot. She covered her face with her hands and said shyly, "No." Li Yundong pretended to be angry. "Why not? Then what are you doing here tonight?" Su Chan twisted her body and said coquettishly, "It's too cold to sleep alone, so I came to ask for warmth." Li Yundong chuckled. "It's warmer to do some exercise." As he said this, his hand reached out to the little girl's full chest. Su Chan's whole body trembled, and her body immediately softened into a pool of mud and fell into his arms. Her nose opened and closed and her breath smelled like orchids. She looked at him coquettishly, her eyes full of love and infatuation. In the eyes of the little girl, she could give everything to the man in front of her. There was nothing to hesitate about. But even so, the little girl still reached out and grabbed Li Yundong's hand. "No, not today," she said, panting. Then she looked at the next room. Li Yundong laughed. "What? Afraid that they'll hear you? Don't worry, I won't make a sound even if you beat me to death." Su Chan's face turned red and she giggled. "I'm afraid that they'll hear me?" Her words were too powerful. Even though Li Yundong had a strong self-control, he was still provoked by the little girl in front of him. His whole body was on fire, and a pillar under his abdomen rose to the sky. Li Yundong smiled bitterly. "Then do you have the heart to watch me suffer?" he said, looking down at his lower body with a pained expression. Blushing, Su Chan mustered up the courage to reach out her hand and gently grab the man's arm. "How about I?" Before she could finish, Li Yundong cut her off with a straight face. "No. I've had enough of the 5 dragons embracing pillar. Today I want to practice something else. Su Chan looked up, and the corners of her eyes were full of rippling waves. She giggled. What do you want to practice? Li Yundong thought for a moment, then put on a straight face and said seriously, Today, let's practice one move, 24 moonlit bridges, where the beautiful woman can teach you how to play the flute. This sentence was so vulgar that Su Chan couldn't understand it. Her cheeks suddenly turned so red that they looked like they were about to bleed. She gave Li Yundong a coquettish look, then suddenly lowered her head and buried her head. Li Yundong was originally just joking with the little girl, but he didn't expect her to really practice the jade woman blowing the flute. Even though he was the reincarnation of the Wisdom King, with a profound understanding of Buddhism and a strong self-control at this time, he couldn't help but feel his heart shake, his mind go dark, and his whole body feel like it was about to explode. He couldn't help but shout happily, but as soon as he shouted, the little girl raised her head and said, You're so annoying. I can hear you. Li Yundong smiled bitterly. But I can't help it either. What should I do? Su Chan giggled. Well, you can wait here for me to say that. I don't care, I can't help it. Li Yundong's face was full of worry. He thought for a moment, then suddenly put on a straight face and said, Then I'll recite a poem. You continue. Su Chan laughed and spat, Bah, you're a dirty poem. Shame, you're so shameless. Li Yundong pretended to be angry and glared at her. Nonsense, I'm reciting a poem by a great man. Listen carefully. The scenery of the north, thousands of miles of ice, thousands of miles of snow. When Su Chan saw that he was seriously reciting a poem, she giggled and continued to bend down. In the past she had read many Taoist books about plucking and nourishing, and one of them talked about sexual techniques. She had thought that it was dirty and disgusting, but today she felt that it was not dirty at all to please her sweetheart. Instead she felt very happy. There was nothing better than this between a man and a woman. Li Yundong recited the poem seriously. At first it was serious, but later the poem carried forward his good tradition of tampering with famous lines and became a downright dirty poem. Su Chan only heard Li Yundong reciting, There are so many beauties in the world, attracting countless heroes to bow down. Unfortunately, Qin Huang and Han Wu were slightly lacking in literary talent, and Tang Zong and Song Zhu were slightly lacking in coquettishness. A generation of fox demons, little girl Su Chan is good at hugging a pillar and playing the flute. As soon as the girl heard this, her face suddenly turned red. She threw herself on Li Yundong, pinching him with both hands, scratching and biting. She gritted her teeth and said, Say it again, say it again. You're the one who's good at hugging a pillar and playing the flute. Li Yundong couldn't help laughing. He grabbed the little girl's wrist with both hands and began to play with her on the bed with a smile. The two of them laughed and joked for a while. Su Chan pouted and refused to be the fox demon of this generation anymore. Li Yundong had no choice but to coax her in a low voice, All right, I was wrong. Can't I make amends for my sins? Stop it. The night is long. Do you want to waste it like this? Su Chan was not really angry. She snorted angrily and said concisely, Sleep? Li Yundong was shocked. So many distinguished men are all sleeping? Seeing that Li Yundong had tampered with the poem again, Su Chan finally couldn't help but burst into laughter. She suddenly thought of Li Yundong's classic lines, If two lovers love each other for a long time, why do they sleep on the bed? And the line, What is love in the world? It makes people take off their clothes and pants. Thinking of this, the girl recalled all the bits and pieces of the two of them together, and her heart couldn't help but be moved. She raised her head, her eyes like silk, and said charmingly, Master, if you don't sleep, what will you do all night? Li Yundong coughed dryly, his expression changed, and he waved his hand and said, Isn't it simple? All of them are gone. Even the most distinguished men are playing all night. Chapter 790. The next day, Su Chan snuck out of Li Yundong's room as if she were a thief. As soon as she stepped out of the room, she saw Little Fox, who had already woken up early and was practicing qi in the living room. Little Fox was already out of bed. When the little foxes in the living room heard the noise, they all turned around and looked at Su Chan with meaningful smiles. Their smiles made Su Chan's hair stand on end. She glared at the little foxes and raised her fists to show off. Her fierce eyes seemed to be saying, What are you looking at? The little foxes giggled, turned their heads and closed their eyes again to meditate. Seeing that she had scared them, Su Chan breathed a sigh of relief and sneaked back to her room. However, as soon as she turned her head, she saw Zhou Qin standing in front of her. The little girl was startled and asked guiltily, Sister Zhou Qin, why are you up so early? Zhou Qin didn't seem to know where Su Chan had come from. She smiled and said, "Didn't you get up earlier?" Su Chan blushed and stammered, "I." Zhou Qin smiled and said, "Master, are you up yet?" At this time, Li Yundong, who was in the room, also heard Zhou Qin's voice and shouted, "Zhou Qin, what's the matter?" Su Chan felt as if she had been pardoned and quickly said, "You go talk to Yundong. I'll go back first." As she said this, she slipped away from Zhou Qin. But as soon as she entered the room and threw herself on the bed, the little girl found something wrong. "Strange, why did I feel like I was having an affair with Yundong when I was so intimate with him? Why did I feel like I was caught in bed just now? It's so strange." Su Chan couldn't help scratching her head with both hands and rubbing her hair. She was a little depressed and said in a low voice, "I hate it. I don't like this feeling. Really." At this time, when Zhou Qin saw Su Chan enter the room, her eyes quickly flashed with sadness, but it was only for a moment. Soon she calmed down, opened the door and entered Li Yundong's room. Li Yundong was sitting cross-legged on the edge of the bed and looking at Zhou Qin with a smile. "It's so early. What's the matter?" Zhou Qin turned around and closed the door. After thinking for a moment, she said softly, "Master, didn't you say that you would go to Desangxian early in the morning? Have you forgotten?" Li Yundong smiled and said, "How could I forget? But isn't it too early now? It's only 6 o'clock, right?" Zhou Qin smiled. "But we still have to write couplets. You want to steam flour buns?" Li Yundong nodded and said, "That's right. You seem to be very busy today." Zhou Qin pursed her lips slightly and smiled. "Well, that's right. But, Master, can I ask, Ziyuan's 2 magic treasures? When can they be repaired?" Li Yundong looked at her strangely. "Why do you suddenly ask about this?" Zhou Qin bit her lip gently and said, "There are many parts of the secret method of patching heaven that I don't understand, and the method of repairing powerful magical weapons described in it is too difficult. I'm afraid that you won't have time to repair it before the next inauguration ceremony. Moreover, I don't know how Chao Kefi is doing now. Aren't you afraid that she will suddenly become a mystical silver fox and you won't even have time to save her?" When it came to Ziyuan and Chao Kefi, the smile on Li Yundong's face faded slightly. He said, "You don't have to worry. When I saw Chao Kefi last time, she was still in a stable state of mind. She should be fine. Moreover, it's useless for us to be anxious now because there are 2 ways to repair powerful magical weapons. One is to use all kinds of materials to forcibly repair powerful magical weapons. This method takes too long, and where can we find the materials? Who knows what materials these 2 powerful magical weapons were made of?" Zhou Qin asked, "What about the other way?" Li Yundong smiled and said, "How do you read? How could you forget the 2 important sentences in the secret method of patching heaven? Although it is said that the way of heaven is to destroy excess and make up for deficiency, the way of man is to destroy deficiency and make up for excess. But if you want to repair powerful magical weapons, you have to use the way of human beings to make up for excess. Think about it, when will God lose his own power, and we can use this part of power to strengthen ourselves and realize giving surplus?" Zhou Qin understood immediately and her eyes lit up. "I understand. It's the thunder retribution." Li Yundong nodded with a smile. "That's right. Only during the thunder retribution can we use the power of God to repair this powerful magical weapon. Otherwise, it will be as difficult as ascending to heaven with human strength." Zhou Qin thought for a moment, but soon a puzzled look appeared on her face. "Since it's so difficult to repair powerful magical weapons, why did Yu Qing help me so readily?" This question stumped Li Yundong. He was obviously stunned. He pondered for a moment and thought to himself, could it be that Yu Qing was just being polite before? Or could it be that the method of repairing powerful magical weapons is not completely recorded in the secret method of patching heaven? Li Yundong thought for a moment, raised his head and said, "Let's put this matter aside first. The matter of repairing powerful magical weapons can't be rushed. Help me contact Chao Kefi and see if she's free. If she's free, ask her to come to us. By the way, wait a minute. Call Lu Feier and ask her to contact Chao Kefi. Don't contact her. It's best to let her stay here until the thunder retribution comes." Zhou Qin answered readily and turned to go out the door. But as soon as she went out, she thought of something and turned back with a sly and mischievous look in her eyes. She pursed her lips and said with a smile, "Master, you have to write the Spring Festival couplets by yourself today?" Li Yundong was shocked. "Ah, I'll write it? Are you sure you didn't make a mistake? Can you show me my handwriting?" Zhou Qin covered her mouth and said with a smile, "I don't care. You are the leader and the chairman of Desangxian. If you don't write it yourself, it won't make sense, will it? Li Yundong scolded her with a smile. Nonsense. It's just a small tea house. How can it be the chairman? Aren't you afraid of being laughed at? Zhou Qin smiled and said, it's small now, but it's not necessarily the case in the future. It's definitely right to set up the rules early. Li Yundong just shook his head and refused to write by himself no matter what. Forget it, you guys set up your own rules. I will never write this word. Otherwise, if people see my handwriting, they will laugh themselves to death. Next time I fight with someone, I won't do anything. If I write a word in front of him, he will laugh himself to death. Zhou Qin couldn't help laughing and her shoulders trembled. Master, if you don't write Spring Festival couplets, you have to help us think about what to write, right? Li Yundong sighed and said, no way do I have to think about this? Really, don't you know that I'm very busy? Zhou Qin rolled her eyes and suddenly said, are you busy playing all night? Li Yundong was about to get out of bed. When he heard this, he almost fell to the ground. He widened his eyes and deliberately stared at Zhou Qin with a straight face. It's not a good habit to eavesdrop. Zhou Qin pretended to be surprised and said, what do you mean by eavesdropping? Master, what are you talking about? Li Yundong saw that her appearance didn't seem to be fake and couldn't help but be stunned. He thought to himself, isn't it? Is she just saying it casually? Li Yundong didn't want to continue this topic, so he waved his hand and said, okay, I got it. I'll think about the couplets later. You can go and do your work. Zhou Qin pursed her lips and smiled. Okay, then I'm leaving. But not long after she left, she poked her head out again and said quickly, Master, next time you talk in a lower voice. After that, she giggled and quickly ran away. Li Yundong was so angry that he almost laughed. This evil disciple, if he didn't beat her for 3 days, she would tear the tiles off her roof. After more than an hour, Ziyuan, Su Chan, Ruan Hongling, Zhou Qin, and the others gathered in the living room and were discussing what to write next. Ziyuan, Zhou Qin, and Su Chan were also warming up by practicing calligraphy on the Xin paper with pens in their hands. Except for Li Yundong, almost everyone in the hall was good at writing. Among them, Ziyuan had copied the calligraphy of the 2 kings since she was a child, namely the calligraphy of Wang Shiji and his son Wang Xianji. Wang Shiji's calligraphy was dignified and delicate, like floating clouds, and refined in style. Wang Xianji's calligraphy could be said to beat Phoenix dance in the pill cave, dragon leap in the clear spring. After copying their calligraphy for more than 10 years, Ziyuan finally formed her own style, ingeniously merging the 2 styles into one. It had both the beauty and elegance of the king and the elegance of the young king, faintly showing the demeanor of a great master. Zhou Qin had learned the calligraphy of Yan Jinqing since she was a child. As the saying goes, the muscles of Yan and the bones of Lu refer to Yan Jinqing's calligraphy, which was rich in strength, dignified and graceful. Su Chan, on the other hand, had learned the calligraphy of Wuxia, a famous female Taoist priest in the Tang dynasty. Her regular script was magnificent and beautiful, and her pen was smooth. Although it could not be compared with the bearing of a great master like Ziyuan, nor could it be compared with the solemn atmosphere of Zhou Qin's calligraphy, it revealed a different kind of feminine and charming beauty. When Li Yundong came down the stairs, he saw Ruan Hongling, Lin Miao, and the big and small foxes of the Fox Zen school watching the 3 of them write seriously at the dining table in the living room. He walked over quietly and watched them quietly write. He seemed to understand something in his heart. As the saying goes, calligraphy is like a person. From a person's handwriting, a person's character can be analyzed, and even their future achievements and fate can be inferred. Although Ziyuan's calligraphy was of an extremely high realm and was elegant and otherworldly, her calligraphy was extremely particular about style, showing that she was a person who followed the rules and attached importance to rules and tradition. Although Zhou Qin's calligraphy was dignified and elegant, the sharpness between the strokes was revealing a competitive spirit of entering the world. Su Chan's calligraphy was playful and lively. She did not pay attention to style, nor did she have the slightest sharpness. The strokes between the strokes were as smooth as jade. It was obvious that she was free to write whatever she wanted. Li Yundong looked at the 3 completely different women, and his heart suddenly moved. He thought to himself, this Desanxian is really suitable. Aren't they just an ethereal fairy, a worldly fairy, and a naughty fox fairy? Li Yundong couldn't help laughing. Good calligraphy, good calligraphy. In the future, the Desanxian will hang your calligraphy everywhere. It will definitely be a treasure in the future. Everyone looked at him with joy. As soon as Su Chan saw him, she immediately smiled and subconsciously wanted to pounce on him to act coquettishly. However, she remembered the embarrassing things that had happened between them yesterday and stopped for a moment. Her cheeks were flushed and she lowered her head to write to hide her shyness. Ziyuan smiled at Li Yundong and said, "You're here? We're all waiting for your Spring Festival couplets." Li Yundong clapped his hands and said, "Okay, as long as you don't let me write, I can do whatever you want me to." Spring Festival couplets, right? Listen carefully. The first couplet is, "Next spring will be very unlucky." The second couplet is, "Bad luck all year round, less wealth." As soon as he said the couplet, everyone burst out laughing. Even a foreign girl like Lin Miao was amused. She also knew that this was not an auspicious couplet. It was clearly a curse for her own bad business. Zhou Qin smiled and said, "Master, no one curses themselves like that, right?" Ziyuan smiled and didn't say anything. She quickly wrote these two sentences on 2 pieces of red paper. Su Chan couldn't help but stare at her and say, "Sister Ziyuan, are you really going to write this? You don't really want to hang up this couplet, do you?" Ziyuan smiled and said, "You've all been fooled. Li Yundong is very cunning." Li Yundong laughed and said, "My parents gave birth to me and Ziyuan knows me well. Look carefully." As he said this, he followed the 2 rows of couplets written by Ziyuan, pointed at the words with his fingers and read them again word by word. The first couplet is, "Next spring will be very good and there will be no bad luck." The second couplet is, "Less bad luck all year round, more wealth." Everyone immediately laughed and cheered. Zhou Qin smiled and said, "So that's how it is. But this couplet is not festive enough, and it doesn't highlight the characteristics of our tea house. No, I have to think of another one." Everyone also clamored and said, "Yes, yes, think of another one." Li Yundong thought for a moment, then clapped his hands and said with a smile, "Yes, listen to this. The sparrow's tongue has not been rained in March, and the dragon bud has been lit in spring." The sparrow's tongue was a kind of tea, and the dragon bud was also a kind of tea. This couplet not only pointed out the characteristics of the tea house's business, but it was also elegant and romantic. When everyone heard this, they all applauded. But at this time, Su Chan felt that the sparrow's tongue seemed to be hinting at something. Last night, Yundong had praised her fragrant tongue as a sparrow's tongue, hadn't he? The more the girl thought about it, the more she blushed, especially when she stole a glance at Li Yundong. When she saw him looking over, Su Chan's heart skipped a beat and she immediately couldn't restrain herself. She waved her hand and said, "No, no, this can't be done." Ling Yu, who was next to her, said curiously, "Such a good couplet, why not?" Su Chan's cheeks turned red and she said incoherently, "This couplet is not good. It's too vulgar." His words caused everyone's praises to come to an abrupt halt. They all looked at each other in dismay, and their expressions were truly marvelous. It was a perfectly good couplet, but when Su Chan said it like that, everyone suddenly felt that there was a different meaning hidden between the lines of the couplet. Li Yundong didn't know whether to laugh or cry. He thought to himself, "My girl, you really confessed without being pressed." Chapter 791. Su Chan soon realized that she had spoken too quickly and said something wrong. She blushed even more, but at this time she could only suppress her shyness, straighten her neck and say, "We don't have these 2 kinds of tea in our shop, so it's not good." Thanks to Su Chan's quick wit, she had come up with such a far-fetched reason. But even if it was far-fetched, it was still a reason. The crowd was also very sensible and did not continue to ask questions. What does it have to do with whether the 2 kinds of tea are obscene or not? Li Yundong also quickly took the opportunity to step down. He coughed dryly and said, "Then I'll think of another couplet. Well, listen to this. Condense into the cloud and mist of Mount Huangshan, float out the morning dew fragrance of Jiuhua." How about this? In this couplet, the first couplet mentioned the famous tea Mount Huangshan Maofeng, and the second couplet mentioned the famous tea of Jiuhua Yunjian. Among them, the tea of Mount Huangshan was mainly Taoist tea, while the tea of Mount Jiuhua was mostly Buddhist tea. In the upper and lower couplets, there were both famous Taoist tea and Buddhist tea. It was really profound, secretly alluding to the cultivation realm of Li Yundong, the master of Disangxian, who cultivated both Buddhism and Taoism. Most of the people present were knowledgeable. When they heard this couplet, their eyes suddenly lit up and they couldn't help but cheer loudly. Ziyuan also nodded and said with a smile, "This couplet is good." As she said this, she picked up the brush and began to write. Zhou Qin pursed her lips and teased Su Chan, "Well, we have these 2 kinds of tea in our shop, don't we?" Su Chan was so embarrassed that her ears were burning, and they were so red that they seemed to be dripping blood. She stamped her feet and said, "You're so annoying. You're bullying me." Everyone laughed. Li Yundong smiled and walked to Su Chan's side, rubbed her black hair dotingly and said with a smile, "Well, the three of you write a couplet each. Didn't I say 3 couplets before? One for each person." As he said this, Li Yundong winked at Su Chan and said, "Do you want to write that one?" Su Chan said angrily, "I won't write it, I won't write it. Whoever wants to write it can write it." After that, she covered her face and rushed to her room. Li Yundong laughed behind her. After the group of people finished writing the couplet, they went to Desangxian. Lin Miao also followed Li Yundong. Although she was an American, she knew a lot about China. She didn't know much about Chinese customs. She only felt that it was new and curious. Even though she came from a rich family, she still felt a little excited at this time, and she was looking forward. When they arrived at Desangxian, Feng Na, Ching Ching, and the others were already busy in the store. As soon as they saw Li Yundong, they all greeted him with a smile. Li Yundong smiled and handed 3 couplets to Feng Na, asking her to hang them at the door and inside the store for good luck. It was early in the morning, so naturally the tea house wouldn't have any business. Most of the customers who came to drink tea would only arrive after noon. Li Yundong glanced at the busy waiters in the shop, who were stealing glances at him from time to time. To his surprise, he found that many of them looked very familiar. "By the way," he said, "I came and left in a hurry last time, so I didn't get to ask you where you hired these new waiters from. Don't tell me you hired them from school?" Feng Na laughed. "Isn't that so? You can be considered to be repaying society and supporting your alma mater. This is called keeping the goodies within the family." Li Yundong laughed and said, "I'm not that noble. This is all you're doing. I don't dare to be greedy." Feng Na laughed and said, "Without you as the stage, I would like to help my alumni, but I don't have the ability to. Don't stand on ceremony or you'll be pretentious." Li Yundong chuckled, turned to the waiters in the shop and said, "Don't sneak around. If you want to see it, do it openly. It's not like you haven't seen it in school before." Some of these female students were older than Li Yundong, some were his classmates and some were his junior sisters. When they heard Li Yundong's words, they all laughed. Li Yundong's name was like thunder in their ears. Some of them had heard it so much that their ears were almost calloused. But now they saw this legendary figure of Tiannan University, who had started his own business from scratch in his junior year. He had made such an achievement at the beginning, which was really admirable. When they saw that Li Yundong was talking and smiling as usual and approachable, they couldn't help but sigh in their hearts. But when they heard that Li Yundong promised to give each of them a red envelope after the Spring Festival, even the most reserved girls couldn't help cheering. For a moment, there was constant cheering in Desangxian. Feng Na looked at the excited red faces and couldn't help sighing. "I can't imagine that I can help so many alumni as soon as I leave school. Speaking of which, many of my classmates are envious of me." Li Yundong smiled and said, "Really? You should use your privilege as the president of the student union and call on your classmates to have tea." Feng Na laughed and scolded, "Don't you know that I've already resigned? I'm not the president of the student union for a long time. Moreover, the price of your Desangxian is so expensive. If you ask your classmates to come and have tea, aren't you cheating them?" Li Yundong clicked his tongue and said, "Do you think so badly of me? Of course, alumni will get a discount. But now that you're not the president of the student union, who will be? It can't be Yan Hua, can it?" Feng Na tilted her head and said, "Who else could it be? My position as the president of the student union was originally thanks to you. I snatched it from him. Isn't it just right to give it back to him now?" Li Yundong laughed and said, "This guy has always disliked the two of us. Now that the 2 people who disliked the most have left, he can be the king alone." Feng Na laughed. Just as she was about to speak, she suddenly heard a burst of laughter coming from outside. Then a group of young men and women came in. The girl in the lead looked at the door and said with a smile, "Oh, it's open. I told you it would be open now." Feng Na looked out curiously and saw that the people were all cadres of the student union. After Feng Na became the president of the student union, she got along with them quite well. At this time, when she saw them, she immediately laughed and asked, "Why are you here?" The girl in the lead smiled and said, "What? You don't welcome us? If you don't welcome us, well, we'll go home now." Feng Na quickly smiled and said, "Don't. I'm happy that you're here. Come in and sit down. By the way, look, who is this?" As she said this, she pointed to Li Yundong beside her. Although the cadres of the student union were more or less influential figures in the school, compared with Li Yundong they were too inferior. Moreover, when they chatted on weekdays, they often mentioned this legendary figure from time to time. Now that they saw him in person, they were so excited that many of them shouted, "Li Yundong, we want to watch Master Tsang's Days of Living with a Stewardess," Li Yundong remembered the incident in the school auditorium and laughed angrily. You guys, if you want to watch an action movie, go home. This is a tea house. Everyone laughed and entered the tea house one after another. Feng Na took the girl in the lead and said with an affectionate smile, "It's the New Year's Eve. You haven't gone back yet?" The girl smiled and said, "No, the school is going to be expanded next year. The cadres of the student union stayed behind to help. They won't go back until 2 days later." Feng Na smiled and said, "Then why aren't you busy today? Why did you come here?" The girl smiled and pointed to the door, saying, "Our president suggested it, so we came." Feng Na was stunned. She followed the direction of her finger and looked outside, only to see Yen Huach standing quietly outside the door with a faint smile on the corner of his mouth. If someone hadn't told her that Yen Huang was outside the door, Feng Na would have ignored his existence. In Feng Na's impression, Yen Hua was a very domineering and conceited boy. No matter where he went, he could not wait for everyone's attention to be focused on him. His desire to show off and control was extremely strong, and he was not willing to be lonely at any time. If he was like him, where everyone greeted them enthusiastically while he quietly watched from the side, it would be absolutely inconceivable. Feng Na was stunned and couldn't help but look at Li Yundong. At this time, Li Yundong was also muttering to himself, "You can't talk about ghosts at night, but you can't talk about people during the day. Speak of the devil. How could it be so coincidental?" Li Yundong glanced at Yen Huang and felt that although the Yen Hua in front of him was beautiful, there was no longer the masculine and conceited air between his eyebrows. His eyebrows had originally been sharp like swords, but at this time they had become blunt and tended to be soft. His temperament had changed dramatically. Li Yundong was secretly surprised and thought to himself, "Why does this guy seem to have suddenly become a different person? It's so strange." But no matter how smart and powerful he was, he would never have thought that the Yen Hua at this time was actually his aunt, Yen Fang. This big rival who had always been against him could be so cruel as to forcibly occupy her nephew's body. Although Li Yundong felt strange, he didn't think about it. He didn't expect that Yen Fang would be so ruthless as to castrate herself for cultivation, so her temperament had changed. Yen Fang was also betting that Li Yundong wouldn't recognize her. At this time she looked calm, but her heart was already in turmoil. She had been defeated by Li Yundong again and again before, and deep in her heart she had a strong fear of Li Yundong. As long as Li Yundong showed the slightest intention of making a move, she would desperately take the nearest classmate and use this person as a hostage to escape from here. But this time Yen Fang was right. Li Yundong was not an immortal. He didn't expect that she would have such an amazing change, let alone that she would appear in front of him at this time. As soon as Yen Fang saw Li Yundong's gaze, her heart was set, and then she was ecstatic. After castrating this man's 7-treasure body, her cultivation had finally advanced by leaps and bounds. Although the male root had been broken and the yang qi had been cut off from then on, Yen Hua's virgin yuan yang qi was still there before. It was this yuan yang qi that had been torturing Yen Hua to death. At this time the male root had been broken. When she ran her qi again, there would be no distracting thoughts. This yuan yang qi perfectly merged with her virgin shenin qi. At this time yin and yang were combined, and Yen Fang's cultivation had undergone an amazing change. In just a few days Yen Fang had recultivated to the top phase of yang spirit, only one step away from the Jinshin. Although the current phase was far from being a threat to Li Yundong, she knew that her chance had come again. Chapter 792. In Li Yundong's opinion, although he had some friction with Yen Hua, it was just a dispute over personal feelings. It was not a life-or-death feud. At this time, Yen Huach had brought his former schoolmates to support him. Whether it was good or bad, out of politeness, Li Yundong couldn't be rude. He smiled slightly and nodded to Yen Hua at the door. "It's really an honor for Mr. President to come. Why don't you come in and have a seat?" Yen Fang stared at Li Yundong with an expressionless face. She just nodded to Li Yundong and then entered the tea house. Although Li Yundong saw that he didn't compete with him, and his attitude was still relatively cold, this was in line with Yen Hua's character and reaction. He didn't take it to heart. He turned his head and whispered to Feng Na, asking her to take out the good tea in the shop and entertain his senior and junior sisters well today. After Yen Fang sat down in her seat, although she looked straight at the tea table in front of her, she had been carefully looking around out of the corner of her eyes. Her ears were pricked up, listening to everyone around her. She had originally wanted to come to Desanxian today to get some information from the little foxes. She had lurked in the Fox Zen school for 9 years, so she naturally knew that these little foxes were big mouths that couldn't keep their mouths shut. However, she hadn't expected to meet Li Yundong and the others here today, especially Zi Yuan. She knew very well what kind of person her Shiji was. As long as she showed the slightest abnormality, Zi Yuan would be able to detect it. Therefore at this time she was highly nervous and kept a low profile. Feng Na saw Yan Hua sitting at the tea table so silently looking down. She felt strange in her heart. Although her relationship with Yan Huang was not very good, it was not as bad as the relationship between Li Yundong and Yan Hua. Moreover, they were classmates after all, and they were both cadres of the student union. Sometimes when they met each other they would still talk politely. Feng Na sat next to Yan Huang and said with a smile, "Yan Hua, you are so strange today. In the past when you saw Li Yundong you wanted to go up and bite him. Why did you not only come to support him today but also be so polite?" Yan Feng smiled slightly. She thought about it carefully as if she was weighing her words and said, "After all, we were all classmates. How could there be any unspeakable hatred between us?" Feng Na laughed when she heard that. "That's right, that's the truth. It's better to squash enmity than keep it alive. Moreover, there is no great enmity between the two of you." Yan Feng smiled, but she sneered in her heart. She glanced at Li Yundong and after a closer look she suddenly found that Li Yundong had reached the perfect jade body realm, which meant that he had reached the peak of the Jinshin phase. Once he passed the thunder tribulation he would be a half-immortal in the world. Cultivating to become a half-immortal in 1 year, wasn't this too terrifying? Even Wang Chongyang and ancestor Chen Tuan weren't so exaggerated, right? Yan Feng was shocked. Although there was no expression on her face, her hands, which were hidden under the table, were trembling slightly. At this moment she felt the uncertainty and despair of revenge. His opponent was too strong, so strong that no matter how hard he tried to catch up, he could only look at his back. Perhaps only his senior brother Wang Yuanshan could be compared to him. But his senior brother. Thinking of this, Yan Feng felt sad in her heart. For the first time her desire for revenge was shaken. In addition, these days for the first time in more than 9 years, she experienced the mystery and wonder of cultivation. In Jin Yang's The Smiling, Proud Wanderer, Dongfang Bubi described his feeling after practicing the Sunflower Manual. He said that after castration he practiced according to the secret method, refining elixirs and taking medicine, and gradually understood the truth of heaven and earth, and understood the happiest thing in the world. Although Dongfang Bubi fell in love with a man in the end, after he castrated himself, Jin Yong described the realm he had experienced, which was indeed not wrong at all. In particular, Yan Feng used the virgin qi of yin to enter the body of Yuan Yang. Once the yin and yang were combined, the two qis merged into one, and the new qi was born. The realm that could be experienced was really not enough to be known to outsiders. Especially since the Ming dynasty, the castration faction in the cultivation world had disappeared, and there would not be a woman who would be cruel enough to destroy her own body and enter a man's body. What's more, she was cruel enough to castrate herself to cultivate. Only a woman like Yan Feng, who was extremely cruel and merciless, could do this. This kind of coincidence was no less than Li Yundong's, but it was a little too cruel. What Yan Feng had learned from her cultivation in the past few days was far more than what she had learned in the past decades. Especially after she finished running her qi, she felt a kind of carefree and ghastly happiness, which really intoxicated her. Yan Feng knew that as long as she persisted in cultivation, she would definitely be able to break through to the Jinshin phase in less than a year. Moreover, once she broke through to the Jinshin phase she would definitely be able to break through to the Thunder Retribution phase soon. Once she reached the Thunder Retribution phase she would really be able to go anywhere no matter how big the world was. But even so what? It would take her a year to break through to the Jinshin phase, but Li Yundong had already reached the peak of the Jinshin phase. What realm would he be in a year later? Yan Feng shivered at the thought of it. One step slower and she would always be slower. Moreover, Li Yundong had so many powerful magical weapons in his hands, and Ziyuan, Zhou Qin and the others were helping him. How could she take revenge empty-handed? Although her schemes were powerful, in the face of absolute strength, no matter how powerful they were vulnerable. At this moment Yan Feng thought in panic, "I'm afraid I won't be able to take revenge in this life. I'd better cultivate peacefully. Let's improve my strength first." Although she had a disciple, Song Yuqiao, she had lost contact with him after the Taoist assembly. Moreover, now that she had become like this, how could she see her? Yan Feng's heart was heavy. She didn't even hear what Feng Na was saying to her. She just responded with a few words. Seeing that Yan Hua was not in the mood to talk, Feng Na stopped talking to him. The other alumni of the student union who had come with Yan Fang did not notice the abnormality of the president of the student union. They were all talking excitedly with Li Yundong and asking all kinds of questions. Li Yundong was a little confused by them, and all kinds of strange questions came one after another. Fortunately, at this time, a person suddenly walked into the Desanxian and rescued him. Li Yundong turned his head and saw Zhang Lufang standing at the door, craning her neck to look into the store. The junior shimmy of the Jingyi school shouted in a crisp voice, "Jinrenli, you're really here. I went to your house before but I couldn't find you." Although Li Yundong didn't have a good relationship with the Jingyi school, Zhang Lufang was one of the few cultivators who had shown kindness to him. Especially now that there was a festival going on, she was smiling. As the saying goes, don't hit a smiling person. No matter how dissatisfied Li Yundong was with the Jingyi school, he still greeted her with a smile. He had heard from Ziyuan that she was Zhang Kongyun's disciple. Her surname was also Zhang, and she had the bloodline of Zhang Tianshi. However, she was a concubine. Although her bloodline was not pure, she was beautiful, had a pleasant personality and was very likable. She was very popular in the Jingyi school. Because there were his alumni in the shop, Li Yundong did not salute them. He just nodded to Zhang Lufang and said with a smile, "Hello, Jinren Zhang. This is your first time coming to the Desanxian, isn't it?" Zhang Lufang rolled her eyes on Li Yundong's face. Suddenly, she covered her mouth and whispered in surprise, "Oh, have you cultivated to the perfect jade body? That's amazing. TSK, your skin is even better than mine. I'm so angry." Li Yundong couldn't help laughing and said, "Jinren Zhang, you didn't come here just to praise my good skin, did you? Do you want me to introduce you to some skincare products?" Zhang Lufang smiled and said, "Jinrenli, you're so humorous. I don't come to the temple for no reason. I came here specially for you today for something." No, I should say that I'm not looking for you, but for Shiji Ziyuan." Li Yundong looked back with a smile and said loudly, "Ziyuan, I'm looking for you." As he said this, he was about to walk into the shop. Seeing that he was about to leave, Zhang Lufang quickly reached out to grab him and said anxiously, "Hey, don't go. I still have something to say to you." Li Yundong asked curiously, "Aren't you looking for Ziyuan?" Zhang Lufang giggled and said, "Someone asked me to pass a message to her. I'm looking for you for something else." As she said this, she lowered her head, took out a book from her pocket and handed it to Li Yundong. She said with a smile, "Come on, give me your autograph." Li Yundong looked at her, not knowing whether to laugh or cry. "Aren't you afraid that your master will find out and accuse you of colluding with the enemy?" Zhang Lufang snorted and tilted her head. Her two pigtails bounced playfully. "I'm not afraid. It's not like he doesn't know. Besides, his own disciple is useless. Who can he blame?" It was the first time that Li Yundong had heard someone talk about him and his master like this. He couldn't help laughing, took Zhang Liufang's book and said, "Then I'll really write it." Zhang Lufang handed over a pen with a smile and said, "Hurry up. I'm not afraid." "What are you afraid of?" Li Yundong shook his head, took the pen and signed two extremely ugly characters. He said helplessly, "If you don't think it's ugly, keep it. If you think it's ugly, go back and burn it." Zhang Lufang glanced at it and also widened her eyes. She raised her head and looked at Li Yundong, as if she couldn't believe that the great Jinren in front of her, who had cultivated to the perfect jade body, could have such ugly handwriting. The corner of Zhang Liufang's eyes twitched, and she subconsciously wanted to burst into laughter, but she quickly held it back. She turned over a page and said with a dry smile, "Sign two more." Li Yundong pretended not to see her strange expression and asked, "Two more? Do you think I'm not embarrassed enough? Are you going back to do wholesale?" Zhang Lufang held back her laughter and said, "I showed it to my two junior sisters. When they heard that I was coming, they clamored for me to ask you for your autograph." Li Yundong suddenly understood. He scribbled two more names on the notebook and handed it over. "Here," he said. "I don't care if your two shimmy cry when they see my signature later." Zhang Lufang couldn't help but burst into laughter. "No, they said that they all know you and are your classmates." This sentence was a slip of the tongue. Li Yundong was stunned when he heard it and subconsciously asked, "My classmates? Your junior sisters?" Only then did Zhang Lufang come to her senses. Oh damn it! How could he tell others about Deng Yu and Deng Jiao? They were the two sword souls of the Sanju formation. What would happen if they became friends with Li Yundong face to face? Won't I be scolded to death by eldest uncle and Shiji? Zhang Lufang smiled at Li Yundong dryly. She didn't dare to look at him, let alone reply to him. She just turned her head and shouted at Ziyuan, who was walking out of the tea house. She was afraid that Ziyuan couldn't hear her, so she inevitably had to shout one more word. But if she shouted one more word, she would stay a little longer. If she stayed a little longer, she was afraid that Li Yundong would ask her about the rest of her things. Zhang Lufang made a trumpet shape with her hands beside her mouth and shouted, "Shiji Ziyuan, Shu Wang Yuanshan asked me to give you a message. He wants to see you." After that, she turned around and ran away like a thief. After running out of Li Yundong's sight with great difficulty, Zhang Lufang turned a corner and hid in a corner. Then she patted her chest and said with a look of relief, "I'm smart enough to run fast. My mouth is tight enough." But she didn't expect that she was known as the Big Mouth in Jingyi school. If she knew anything, the whole school would know. When she shouted, it didn't sound strange to others, but to Yen Fang, who was sitting in the tea house, it was like a clap of thunder had exploded in her ears. Yen Fang had been hiding in the Fox Zen school for 9 years without showing any signs. Even with her mental fortitude, she couldn't help but tremble at this time. Her body was shaking uncontrollably, and her heart was in turmoil as if a storm had been set off. What? Shiji, he is still alive. Chapter 793. Zhang Lufang, the loudspeaker, had no idea that she had caused a huge disaster, but she complacently took Li Yundong's ugly signature back to the mountain to report. When Ziyuan heard Zhang Liufang's voice, she was stunned at the door of Desangxian, and her expression became extremely complicated. She couldn't help but look at Li Yundong, only to see that he was looking at her gently, as if he knew what she was hesitating about. Li Yundong said softly, "Go, you should have gone a long time ago." Ziyuan bit her lip gently. After she got the news that her master, Wang Yuanshan, was still alive, she didn't rush back immediately. First, she felt a little bitter and resentful in her heart. Why did he leave her and Hong Ling behind? In the past 10 years she had been alone with Hong Ling, who was lonely. On the one hand she had to take care of the declining sect, on the other hand she had to raise the young Hong Ling, and at the same time she had to cultivate by herself. She was so young, but she had to shoulder such a heavy burden. Who could understand her hardships? Secondly, she also guessed that there must be a secret behind her master's fake death. Although he was forced to show up now, if she rashly went to find him, she might ruin his plans. At that time, she had a strong urge to question her master. Since he had been in Mount Longhu, why did he watch her live such a hard life and be bullied like this? Why didn't he help her? Moreover, if she went to find him immediately when she heard the news about her master, what would Li Yundong think? This thought had been faintly entangled in Ziyuan's heart for a long time. Even she didn't realize that this was the main reason why she hadn't gone to find Wang Yuanshan. But now that she heard Li Yundong's words, Ziyuan's heart suddenly warmed and she felt relieved. At the same time she was deeply moved. The two of them looked at each other as if everything was silent. Ziyuan looked at Li Yundong gratefully and nodded slightly. "Well, I'll be back soon." Li Yundong also nodded slightly and smiled. "Well, don't worry. Be careful." The two of them were talking like ordinary friends, but behind every word, there was a sincere feeling that neither of them was willing to admit publicly. Ziyuan wanted to tell Li Yundong, "I'm not leaving forever," to make him feel at ease. And Li Yundong also understood her thoughts very well. He wanted to tell her, "But it doesn't matter. I don't mind." Only the two of them could understand what they were thinking. At this time Ruan Hongling also rushed to Ziyuan's side, grabbed her arm with both hands and said angrily, "Shiji, don't go. Now that I thought of looking for you, where did you go before?" Ruan Hongling was a stubborn person. Previously she was the one who missed her master the most, but now that she heard that her master was still alive, she was also the one who was the most angry and couldn't bear it. Ziyuan smiled and reached out to tidy the hair around Ruan Hongling's ear. She said softly, "Don't be silly. No matter what, he is our master. A teacher for a day, a father for life. You're being disrespectful." There were tears in Ruan Hongling's eyes. She stubbornly turned her head to the side and said, "Then you go." "I won't go." Ziyuan shook her head helplessly and said with a smile, "Master knows that you won't go, so he didn't ask you to go." When Ruan Hongling heard that, she became even angrier. She stomped her feet and said, "Annoying, annoying. He has always looked down on me in his heart." As she said this, she covered her face and cried as she left. The people in the tea house saw that the joyful atmosphere had turned into such a depressing one in the blink of an eye. For a moment they looked at each other and didn't dare to speak. Seeing that she was leaving, Li Yundong hurriedly shouted, "Hey Hongling, where are you going? Don't run around." Zhou Qin immediately said, "I'll go after her." Li Yundong nodded and said, "Okay." Ziyuan sighed softly and said, "It's okay. She's just throwing a tantrum. She'll be fine in a few days. I'll go back to Mount Longhu now and come back tonight at the latest. Li Yundong thought for a moment and looked like he wanted to say something but stopped on second thought. Su Chan, who had been looking at the two of them, suddenly said, Yundong, go with Sister Ziyuan. Her words were so sudden that both Ziyuan and Li Yundong were stunned. Ziyuan quickly said, no, I can go by myself. However, Su Chan shook her head and said, Jingyi school has done a lot of two-faced things. I'm afraid that after you go, you will be detained by them and won't be able to come back. Have you forgotten how Wang Yuanshan was caught? Ziyuan was suddenly terrified. She couldn't help looking at Li Yundong, only to see that he was also looking at her. The two of them looked at each other. It wasn't that Li Yundong hadn't thought of this before, but he was afraid that Su Chan would be jealous, so he was too embarrassed to say it. But now that Su Chan had taken the initiative to bring it up, Li Yundong was both moved and emotional. He reached out his hand and rubbed the little girl's hair dotingly. He said with a smile, I didn't expect that the little girl who causes trouble all day long will also know how to think. You've grown up. Su Chan stuck out her bright red and tender tongue and said, no, isn't this what I should do? Sister Ziyuan usually takes good care of me. Li Yundong smiled and no longer stood on ceremony with Su Chan. He nodded to Ziyuan and said, let's go. There's no time to lose. Let's go now. After that, he turned around and nodded to Feng Na and the others, then left in a hurry with Ziyuan. Feng Na and Qing Qing watched him come and go in a hurry. They couldn't help but sigh and say, alas, it's really hard to see the dragon's tail. He just said hello and disappeared in the blink of an eye. I don't know what he's busy with all day long. Qing Qing blinked her eyes and said, hey, what do you think they were talking about before? They made it seem like they were filming a TV series. What were they doing? What do they mean by real people? Feng Na shook her head and said, don't think about it. It's useless to think about these things. When Li Yundong wants us to know one day, he will naturally tell us. If he doesn't want us to know, it may not be a good thing for you to know. Qing Qing's face was filled with awe. She gave him a thumbs up and said, you're good. You're a qualified mistress. You have to carry forward this kind of style of not caring about anything and only gambling on tomorrow with your youth. Feng Na was so angry that she laughed. She stretched out her hand to pinch Qing Qing under the table. She gritted her teeth and scolded, will you die if you don't speak? Be careful that I go back and tear your mouth apart. Qing Qing had naturally experienced the power of Feng Na's 9 white bone claws. She quickly raised her hands and said with a smile, no, I admit defeat, okay? There are people watching. Save me some face. As she said this, she glanced to the side and was suddenly stunned. She asked curiously, hey, where's Yan Hua? At this time, Feng Na also looked up and saw that the seat where Yan Hua had been sitting had disappeared. Feng Na also said curiously, strange, wasn't he there just now? Why did he disappear in a blink of an eye? But they didn't take it to heart, and in the blink of an eye, they forgot about it. After Li Yundong and Ziyuan found an empty corner, they flew together toward Mount Longhu. After flying for a short while, they landed at the foot of Mount Longhu. Ziyuan came to the foot of the side peak where the Linggong sect was located. But when she was about to go up the mountain, Li Yunyang stopped her and said, when you get here, you can go up alone. If there is any movement, I will be there as soon as possible. Ziyuan's current strength was no less than that of Wang Yuanshan 10 years ago. It was absolutely impossible to catch her without making a sound. Once someone wanted to deal with her, there would definitely be a lot of movement. With Li Yundong's current realm, he could reach the top of the mountain in an instant. If he wanted to save her, he could do it in the blink of an eye. If he followed her up, he might become a laughing stock. It was better to just stay at the foot of the mountain. Ziyuan understood what Li Yundong was thinking, so she nodded and slowly walked up the mountain. She had lived on this mountain for more than 10 years. She couldn't be more familiar with every tree and every blade of grass. She looked around at the scene that could be drawn with her eyes closed. But at this time, when she looked at it again, she suddenly felt a strange feeling, but the scenery had not changed at all. Ziyuan couldn't help but think of the time when Hong Ling had come to find her in tears. She had gone down the mountain with her on a night when the moon was bright and the stars were sparse. From then on, her life had changed. Ziyuan thought about her cultivation in the past 10 years, and then thought about everything that had happened after she had gone down the mountain. Suddenly, she felt that in just a few months, more things had happened than she had done in the past 10 years of hard work. Ziyuan sighed softly, but suddenly, a very magnetic voice came from behind her. Ziyuan, why are you sighing? Hearing this voice, Ziyuan's body trembled. Only then did she realize that she had been thinking about something along the way. In a daze, she had already reached the top of the mountain. At this time, a green pine tree in front of her was like a big canopy umbrella, shrouding her head in lush greenery. An handsome and elegant man was standing in front of a huge rock. One of his hands was behind his back, and the other hand was gently pressed in front of the rock. He was smiling at her. Master. Ziyuan's voice trembled slightly, but she quickly knelt down, bowed deeply and kowtowed. Disciple Ziyuan greets Master. Wang Yuanshan had a faint smile on his face, but his eyes looked at Ziyuan meaningfully. He slowly asked, Get up? Don't be polite with your words, but you're cursing me in your heart. That girl Hongling must hate me very much, right? Ziyuan's body trembled and she bowed even lower. I don't dare. Hongling also misses you very much. Wang Yuanshan stared at Ziyuan for a long time before he shook his head and said, You don't mean what you say. Hey, get up. You know I don't like people who kowtow to me, nor do I like people who follow me around. If you behave like this, then I won't recognize you as my disciple. Only then did Ziyuan get up. She lowered her head slightly and said softly, Master, why did you ask me to come here? Wang Yuanshan's eyes became more and more strange. He looked at Ziyuan up and down carefully and asked strangely, Aren't you curious why I pretended to be dead at that time? Why did I leave you behind? Ziyuan smiled bitterly. What else could it be? Isn't it because of Senior Ao Wushuang? Wang Yuanshan sighed softly. Of course there is a reason for her. But there is another reason for her. Don't you want to know? Ziyuan was slightly stunned and raised her head, but soon she lowered it again and shook it gently. I don't want to know. Wang Yuanshan looked at her and shook his head with a wry smile. You're still the same. You say you don't care, but you care very much in your heart. Alas. Well, don't be awkward. I came here today to tell you a few things. Because in a while, you really won't be able to see me anymore. Ziyuan's heart trembled. She suddenly raised her head and was surprised. Master, what do you mean? Wang Yuanshan smiled slightly. Nothing. 10 years ago I had already died once. Now that I've lived for another 10 years it's already worth it. But before I truly leave I want to tell you something first, lest you resent me in the future. At this time the resentment in Ziyuan's heart had long disappeared. Her pretty face was pale and she said in a trembling voice, Master, what are you talking about? What do you mean you died 10 years ago? When will you really leave? Wang Yuanshan lovingly looked at his proudest disciple. He lovingly stretched out his hand and gently stroked her hair. He softly said, Because in about 2 months' time, I will have to say goodbye to all of you. What happened 10 years ago happened too suddenly, and I didn't warn you about many things. As a result, you've been living a hard life for the past 10 years. I feel very sorry for it, so I want to tell you everything clearly today. You can take these words as my last words before I leave. I still owe everyone an update. I should go to Beijing soon to do something. I guess I'll have to make it up when I come back, but I'll try my best to make it up before I go. Chapter 794. Hearing Wang Yuanshan's words, Ziyuan was terrified. She looked at Wang Yuanshan in disbelief and said, Master, I don't understand what you're saying. What do you mean? Wang Yuanshan smiled, sighed softly and said, Silly girl, you're usually so smart. Why are you so stupid at this time? Think about it, why didn't they kill me when they caught me 10 years ago? Ziyuan's heart tightened. This was also what she couldn't figure out the most these days. Others might not know, but as an internal cultivator of the Jingyi school, she knew very well how the Jingyi school dealt with traitors. No matter how talented Wang Yuanshan was and how highly regarded he was by Master Zhang, he had betrayed the sect, which was a great blow to the Jingyi school. If he was not severely punished, how could he convince the public in the future? Therefore, after Wang Yuanshan had been captured, Ziyuan knew that her master would definitely die. Only by completely eliminating the traitor could people be the greatest deterrent. Otherwise, there would be endless cases of apostasy in the future, and then the sect would be finished. But when Ziyuan heard the news that Wang Yuanshan was not dead, she also secretly thought, why didn't Master Zhang kill my master? Is it just because he cherishes talent? Wang Yuanshan looked at the change in Ziyuan's expression. He chuckled and said, It's strange, isn't it? But if you had known more than a decade ago that there might be a great calamity in the future, you wouldn't have found it strange. Ziyuan was even more shocked. She quickly realized something and asked tentatively, Master, are you talking about the mystical silver fox? Wang Yuanshan nodded slowly. Among the Buddhist sects, Wuxia, the disciple of Master Purin of Shiyuan Temple, is the best in the world. Among the Taoist sects, the most powerful one in spying on the secrets of heaven is Lu Guan, who knows the direction of the world by observing the stars. These two sects predicted more than a decade ago that there would be a great calamity today and that the mystical silver fox would be reborn. Therefore, as early as that time, the cultivation sects of Buddhism and Taoism began to plan to deal with this calamity. As he spoke, Wang Yuanshan walked to the front of the wind-dust stone with his hands behind his back. He looked at the clouds and mist on the opposite top of the mountain and sighed. At that time, all the major sects were trying their best to find and train people who could compete with the mystical silver fox. But after searching, all the major sects were very clear that more than 1,000 years ago, the mystical silver fox almost swept the world with her own strength. Later, only one soul and two souls escaped to Japan, and almost swept Japan again. Hey, such a peerless expert in this Dharma-ending age, it was no different from a fool's dream to find someone who could compete with the mystical silver fox. Unless the living Buddha descends, the wisdom king is reborn, the golden immortal is reborn, or the gods descend to the mortal world. Ziyuan couldn't help but ask, but now the Akalanatha has been reincarnated. Isn't Li Jiandong specialized in dealing with the mystical silver fox? Wang Yuanshan shook his head. Who could have guessed that the immovable wisdom king would reincarnate more than 10 years ago? Wuhua's destiny connection and Lu Guandao's star-gazing can predict the birth of the tribulation, but they can't predict how the tribulation will end. They can guess the beginning, but it's impossible for them to guess the result, let alone the process. Therefore, Zhang Tianshi worked so hard to train me at that time in order to deal with the mystical silver fox. Ziyuan's expression suddenly became a little strange. She asked hesitantly, but master, since you know why did you and fell in love with Ao Wushuang? Is that what you want to ask? Wang Yuanshan asked with a smile. Ziyuan bit her lip gently and nodded slightly. Wang Yuanshan chuckled and asked instead of answering, do you remember the psalm I once left you? This psalm had been read by Ziyuan countless times. She could really recite it backwards. At this time, hearing Wang Yuanshan's words, she immediately whispered without hesitation, I remember. Once the Jindan appears, the mortal fate is set, and the thunder first rings, then the truth can be seen. The spirit mirror is easy to break the mortal tribulation, and the immortal sword can't break the red rope. Yunhai sits and looks at old Yunhai and talks about the wind and dust in front of the stone. Chang'e has no regrets about stealing elixirs. Why should Hongyang envy Zhang Sheng? Wang Yuanshan said with a smile, at that time, you stood in front of this stone and asked me what this poem meant. I told you that this poem was about the twists and turns and fate of you and your destined lover together. You asked me why I would fall in love with this lover I didn't know in the future. I told you that when the time came, you would naturally fall in love. Do you understand now? Ziyuan's body suddenly trembled, and a complicated look flashed in her eyes. If this sentence had been said to her before she went down the mountain, she would not have understood it. But now she really couldn't understand it more. When she went down the mountain, she was sure that she would not fall in love with the so-called lover mentioned in her master's psalm. Especially when she saw Li Jiandong for the first time, she was even more sure that he was a greedy and lecherous person who would not amount to anything. But what was the result? After getting along with him day and night, this man had slowly walked into the depths of her heart. She couldn't get rid of this figure even if she wanted to. Presumably, when Master met Ao Wushuang, it was probably like this, right? They got along little by little, walked into each other's lives, and deeply imprinted each other's voice and appearance on their souls. They couldn't forget each other even for a second. As long as they were separated, they could feel that they were entangled by a suffocating pain. Ziyuan sighed softly and asked in a low voice, but master, since you predicted that, the successor of Jindan would be my lover, why didn't you predict that, he would fall in love with other women? These words were filled with hidden bitterness. Only at this time would the strong Ziyuan reveal her weakness and grievance slightly. Wang Yuanshan smiled, which revealed an open-minded and wise smile that had seen through the vicissitudes of the world. Silly child, this poem is talking about your life, not his. This is my life. Ziyuan was slightly stunned and murmured these words in a low voice. Her expression was as if she had become infatuated. Looking at Ziyuan's appearance, Wang Yuanshan sighed for her in his heart. What a silly child. She is usually cold and cheerless, as if there is nothing in the world that she would care about, but in fact, deep in her heart, there is a tenacity that she can't bear to give up. Wang Yuanshan looked at Ziyuan fixedly. After a long time he sighed and said, my meeting with Ao Wushuang was destined. It can be said that it was deliberately arranged by someone. The purpose was for me to break into the Fox Zen school and figure out the direction and plan of the Fox Zen schools. But I didn't expect that Ao Wushuang and I would fall in love. Ziyuan couldn't help but laugh helplessly. Fate made fools of people. There was nothing more dramatic than this. Wang Yuanshan also shook his head and said with a smile, "It was just a play, but I didn't expect it to become real." At that time, Zhang Tianshi knew that I had betrayed the sect because of Ao Wushuang. He was furious and swore that he would take my head. Later, Brother Kong Yun lured me into the trap, and I was captured by many masters of the Jingyi school with the power of the magic formation. Originally, Zhang Tianshi wanted to kill me to frighten the many disciples of the sect. But Brother Kong Yun begged me, saying that if I died, I was afraid that no one would be able to deal with the disaster 10 years later. So, after Zhang Tianshi and many Shirbo at that time discussed it, they decided to spare my life for the time being, but they said that Ao Wushuang must not be spared. Ziyuan's heart trembled. She knew that if Zhang Tianshi and the others insisted on this opinion, Ao Wushuang would have been dead by now. But why was Ao Wushuang still alive? Seeing her puzzled expression, Wang Yuanshan smiled and continued, "Yes, you must be wondering why Ao Wushuang is still alive. The reason is very simple. It's because I took the initiative to make a deal with them." "What deal?" Ziyuan reacted very quickly. She faintly smelled an ominous aura, which had something to do with Wang Yuanshan saying that she would die soon. Wang Yuanshan said lightly, "Zhang Tianshi and the others promised to let Ao Wushuang go, and I promised to be trapped in the absolute love extinguishing formation willingly." Ziyuan suddenly took a deep breath. The absolute love extinguishing formation? This is too cruel, isn't it? Ziyuan naturally knew the power of the absolute love extinguishing array. It was originally a magic array invented by Buddhist cultivators, but later it was learned by Taoist cultivators and used to deter those cultivators who attempted to marry the alien race. However, although this formation was powerful, as long as human cultivators did not go out of the formation, there would be no danger. Even if a demon wanted to enter the formation, it would only slowly wear down the demon's demon chi and spiritual power, and it would not be able to instantly kill the demon. Besides, the mystical silver fox would not be so stupid as to go into the absolute love extinguishing formation by herself. Master said that she would die soon. Where did this come from? Could it be? Ziyuan's heart suddenly skipped a beat, and her eyes widened. Suddenly, she whispered in disbelief, "Master, do you mean that if the mystical silver fox recovers her power in the future, you will go out to fight her?" Wang Yuanshan looked at Ziyuan fixedly, smiled slightly and nodded slowly. "You are worth teaching." Ziyuan's body trembled and she couldn't help saying in a hoarse voice, "Master, if you go out to fight the mystical silver fox, you will attract the 9 heaven divine night thunder." Wang Yuanshan said slowly, "Yes, this is the agreement I reached with Zhang Tianshi and the others. They let Ao Wushuang go and I will die with the mystical silver fox at the cost of my own life." Ziyuan only felt that there was a thunder in her head, buzzing. It was not easy for her to see her master again. How could this be the result? Ziyuan's body was on the verge of collapse. She subconsciously shouted, "No, it can't be like this. They are too selfish to do this. It's too much." Wang Yuanshan looked at Ziyuan lovingly, shook his head and said, "When the nest is overturned, there will be no intact eggs. If the mystical silver fox really recovers all her power with her character, she will definitely take revenge. At that time the world will be in chaos. It will not only be us cultivators who will suffer, but also those innocent mortals in the secular world. The reason why I promised them was not only to protect Ao Wushuang, but also to protect the people in the world. Therefore, I don't resent them and I hope you don't resent them. They just want to protect the incense in the cultivation world so that it can continue to be passed on." Ziyuan was well educated and reasonable. Chapter 795. Li Yundong had never seen Ziyuan cry in front of him, let alone cry out loud like this. For a moment he panicked and raised his hands in the air. He didn't know whether to hug this beautiful fairy or press his hands on her shoulders. Li Yundong was at a loss and didn't know what to do. He could only ask repeatedly, "What happened?" Ziyuan just shook her head and burst into tears. This cry was like the Yellow River bursting its dike and the Yangtze River bursting its mouth. All the emotions that had been accumulated in Ziyuan's heart for many years were released in an instant. Seeing that she was unwilling to say anything, Li Yundong could only reach out and gently put his arm around her shoulder. His other hand gently patted her back, silently accompanying her and not asking any more questions. Ziyuan cried for a long time before she slowly stopped crying. She put her hands on Li Yundong's chest and propped herself up. She wiped her tears and said in a choked voice, "Master, he told me what to do after his death." Li Yundong was shocked. "What? Wang Yuanshan? The best in the world? He told you what to do after his death? What's going on?" After Ziyuan finished venting, she calmed down and gradually controlled her emotions. With red eyes, she told Li Yundong in a low voice what she had said to Wang Yuanshan on the mountain. Li Yundong only listened with his eyes wide open, and his whole person was stunned on the spot. Li Yundong took a deep breath and said, "Buddhism and Taoism began to deal with all this more than 10 years ago? It can't be, can it? This is too exaggerated, isn't it?" When Li Yundong had learned that Yen Fang had sneaked into the Fox Zen school for 9 years just to take revenge, he had been shocked by Yen Fang's patience and perseverance. However, he had soon discovered that Lu Yi had faked his death, and he seemed to have discovered Yen Fang's true identity. Then the mantis stalks the cicada, unaware of the oriole behind. But now, Li Yundong had discovered that the cultivators of the older generation of Buddhism and Taoism were the real oriole, the hunter holding the bow and arrow behind its back. Wasn't it too scary to plan for more than 10 years? For a moment, Li Yundong couldn't help but be shocked by such a layout. He was tongue-tied and said, "In that case, why didn't they destroy the Fox Zen school earlier? You're only sending those young cultivators?" Ziyuan shook her head and said, "They're just afraid of alerting the enemy. They besieged Mount Tian long before. Now it seems that it was just a test, but they didn't expect that they would test you out." Li Yundong suddenly thought of something and said in disbelief, "None of the people who participated in the siege of the Fox Zen school knew the real purpose of all this?" Ziyuan sighed softly and said, "They didn't know that they were just pawns. Even I didn't know at that time. I'm afraid there are no more than 10 people in the cultivation world who know about this." Li Yundong was stunned for a long time before he shook his head and said, "After more than 10 years of planning, today the real killer move was revealed. It's really scary. Isn't Wang Yuanshan afraid that I'll tell others?" Ziyuan raised her head and fixed her eyes on Li Yundong. She said softly and firmly, "You won't?" Li Yundong really wanted to ask Ziyuan why she was so sure that he wouldn't, but he saw that there seemed to be an extra emotion in her eyes that she didn't usually have. His heart skipped a beat for no reason and he didn't dare to ask again. He coughed dryly and changed the topic, saying, "What is the mirror of heaven and earth that your master mentioned? Why haven't I heard you mention it before? Is it very important? Let's hurry up and get it first." Ziyuan's heart was in a mess. She wanted to save her master, but she knew that Wang Yuanshan was ready to die. Moreover, the current situation was a dead end. No one could solve it. Even if she had the ability to reach the heavens, she was afraid that she would be helpless. And most importantly at present, it seemed that Wang Yuanshan had used herself as the bait to lure the absolute emotion-extinguishing formation. After she came out of the formation, she would use her spiritual power to entangle the mystical silver fox, and then lure the 9 divine night thunder to kill the mystical silver fox. This was indeed the safest way. If she acted rashly, she might even ruin her master's plan. It would be a small matter if she was punished or even died, but if she implicated all the people in the world, it would not be enough to atone for her sins even if she died 100 times. Therefore, Ziyuan did not encourage Li Yundong to find a way to save Wang Yuanshan. She could only watch helplessly as her most respected master approached death day by day, walking step by step towards the abyss, and she could do nothing about it. Ziyuan's heart was unprecedentedly heavy, and she had never been so weak before. The beautiful fairy whispered, "Li Yundong, will you accompany me for a while? Let's walk all the way. I want to talk to you more." Li Yundong also understood Ziyuan's feelings very well. He sighed in his heart, but said with a smile on his face, "Okay, let's walk slowly all the way if it's not far." Ziyuan said in a low voice, "It's not very far. It's near Mount Longhu." Li Yundong nodded. The two of them walked slowly along the rugged mountain road of Mount Longhu, shoulder to shoulder. Just as Ziyuan stumbled down the mountain, Wang Yuanshan had already disappeared in front of the Fengqian stone, but after Ziyuan's figure disappeared on the mountain road, he reappeared in the same place. His eyes were fixed in the direction of Ziyuan's leaving figure, and his expression was complicated. After a long time he let out a long sigh. After that he said slowly, "Come out. Do you think I don't know you're hiding?" After that Wang Yuanshan looked sharply in one direction. After a while he saw a figure slowly coming out of the woods. Wang Yuanshan saw a man standing in front of him. He had delicate skin and a handsome appearance, but his eyebrows were quite feminine. What surprised him most was that the man was staring at him, his eyes full of shock and excitement. Wang Yuanshan was stunned. He didn't understand why the strange man in front of him was so excited to see him. He thought to himself, does this guy know me? Wang Yuanshan looked at the man in front of him with unkind eyes, snorted coldly and said, did you have a good time eavesdropping just now, fellow Taoist? He had always been kind and didn't easily fight with others. He also didn't like people fighting in front of him. Although he knew that someone was eavesdropping in the distance, he didn't expose him. He only waited for Ziyuan to leave before he exposed the man, lest Ziyuan found out and fought with him. But when he said this, the man didn't respond at all. He just looked at him in shock. Wang Yuanshan knew that what he had said to Ziyuan was extremely confidential, but if it had been 10 years ago, if the man in front of him had heard it, he would have definitely killed him. But now the arrow was already on the string, and it was about to be touched. Even if someone knew, it wouldn't affect the overall situation, so he didn't need to kill the man in front of him. He only needed to keep him in captivity for 2 months and then let him go. Seeing that he didn't speak, Wang Yuanshan snorted and said, since this fellow Taoist refuses to tell me, don't blame me for being rude. After that, he stepped forward and was about to make a move, but suddenly he heard the man cry uncontrollably, Senior Shirdi. In Wang Yuanshan's life, there was only one person who called him Shirdi, and that was his shimi, Yanfang. When he suddenly heard this, his body suddenly shook and he looked at the man in front of him in shock. He said dumbfoundedly, what did you call me? This person was Yanfang. She also knew that not only had her appearance and voice changed greatly, but even her gender had changed. No wonder her Shirdi couldn't recognize her. She took a step forward, and years of grievances and lovesickness gathered together. She couldn't help crying and said, Shirdi, it's me, I'm Yanfang. Even though Wang Yuanshan had a calm temperament at this moment, he couldn't help shaking and almost fainting. His shimi used to be a famous beauty in the cultivation world. Her beauty was no less than that of Ziyuan and Ao Wushuang. Unfortunately, her temperament was too arrogant, and she never pretended to be nice to others, so she was not popular. But 10 years later, such a beauty had turned into a man. This was really something that no one in the world could imagine. Wang Yuanshan was dumbfounded and stammered, You are Yanfang. How is this possible? As he said this, his face changed and he said sternly, Who the hell are you? How dare you pretend to be my shimi like this? Do you think I won't kill people just because I have a good temper? Yanfang smiled bitterly and said, Senior brother, I know you definitely won't believe that I'm Yanfang looking like this, but is there another person in the world who knows about the little things that we get along with each other? As she said this, she slowly told him about her and Wang Yuanshan's cultivation in the same sect. Even if it was a trivial thing, she was very familiar with it. In the past, she was proud and arrogant, and she didn't take anyone in the world seriously. Even if it was a person like Zhang Tianshizi of the Jingyi school, she would only look at him a little more, but it was impossible for her to praise him more. She was such a proud person, but she only loved Wang Yuanshan and believed that he was her lover. She just liked him silently in her heart and didn't show it on her face or mouth. Wang Yuanshan only regarded her as his sister, and there was no romantic relationship between them. But at this time, when he heard Yanfang talk about the trivial things in the past, his heart suddenly trembled. He knew that the person in front of him must be Yanfang, and only she knew so much about him. He also instantly understood his shimi's affection for him. In the world, only those who loved someone deeply could remember every little detail of this person so clearly, just like how he could remember every little detail of his relationship with Ao Wushuang as if it were his own family treasures. Although Wang Yuanshan didn't love Yanfang, it would be a lie to say that he had no feelings for his shimi. It was just that this kind of feeling did not involve love between a man and a woman. It was just the love between a brother and a sister. He saw that Yanfang, who had been peerless in the past, had now become a cultivator who looked neither male nor female. He seemed to empathize with her pain. This sentimental man in the world felt as if his heart was being twisted by a knife, and his eyes turned red. He said in a trembling voice, Shimi, how did you become like this? When he called her Shimi, Yanfang couldn't help but burst into tears. She covered her face and began to cry bitterly. Today there was lightning and thunder in Dongwu City. Fellow Taoists, does anyone want to go through the thunder tribulation? What? Don't you know which city Dongwu City is? Well, go to Baidu and search for Shantang to see which city this place is. Chapter 796. Yanfang was extremely strong-willed and tolerant. If she hadn't seen Wang Yuanshan, who was closest to her, it would have been impossible to see her shed a tear. Wang Yuanshan knew his Shimi very well. He had known her for decades, but this was the first time he had seen her cry. Wang Yuanshan's heart ached when he saw this. He couldn't help but want to comfort her, but Yen Fang immediately took a step back and shouted hoarsely, "Don't come over." Wang Yuanshan immediately stopped and said in pain, "Shimi, what happened?" Yen Fang had heard everything clearly. She also knew that her Shixiang still loved Ao Wushuang, and that in 2 months her Shixiang would probably die generously. She didn't want to tell Wang Yuanshan that she had lurked in the Fox Zen school for 9 years in an attempt to take revenge, because she knew that if she said this, not only would Wang Yuanshan not appreciate her, but he would also blame her. Wang Yuanshan knew her, but she knew Wang Yuanshan better. Moreover, if she were still a girl at this time, she could tell him everything, but now. Yen Fang felt as if a knife was being twisted in her heart. She cried bitterly and said, "Shixiang, don't ask. Please don't ask." Wang Yuanshan knew that Yen Fang was strong-willed and even a little headstrong. Now that she had become like this, there must be some unspeakable difficulties. He had never seen Yen Fang's nephew, and he didn't know that Yen Fang had occupied his nephew's body. But seeing Yen Fang like this, he felt even more pity for his Shimi. He just sighed heavily and said, Okay, I won't ask, but Shimi, why did you come to me today?" Yen Fang suddenly raised her head and shouted with tears in her eyes, "Do I have to come to you for something else?" Wang Yuanshan was speechless. He didn't know how to face his infatuated junior sister. He lowered his head and sighed deeply. "Junior sister, I know how you feel about me. However, I believe that you have heard it just now. A calamity is about to come. When the nest is overturned, no eggs will remain intact. You should hide as far as you can. Don't drag him into this." Yen Fang wiped away her tears and gave a sad smile. She looked at Wang Yuanshan with a complicated look in her eyes and said slowly, "Senior brother, I have become neither a man nor a woman. Although my cultivation has progressed by leaps and bounds, my heart is filled with remorse and hatred. I really want to be a woman again. But I know senior brother has a magic treasure that can help me realize this wish." Wang Yuanshan blurted out, "Will of Universe Mirror?" Yen Fang nodded slowly. "That's right. Senior brother, are you willing to give this magic treasure to me?" Wang Yuanshan suddenly looked embarrassed. "But I've already promised to give it to Ziyuan." Yen Fang knew that Wang Yuanshan had another secret magic treasure in addition to the Bahuang and Liuha sword, the sky-reaching glazed mirror, and the purple gold Luo jade plate. Wang Yuanshan had only occasionally mentioned this magic treasure to them, but they had never seen him use it. This magic treasure was extremely important, so important that Wang Yuanshan thought that all the magic treasures of the Linggong sect together were not as important as the Heaven and Earth Rui mirror. Therefore he had deliberately hidden this magic treasure and only told his disciple and Shimi the location of the treasure. No one else even knew about the existence of the Heaven and Earth Rui mirror. When Wang Yuanshan had betrayed the sect, he had been quickly wiped out by the Jingyi school. All of this had happened so suddenly that Wang Yuanshan hadn't had time to tell Ziyuan and Yen Fang that he had moved the Heaven and Earth Rui mirror before he had been arrested. Not only Ziyuan, but Yen Fang had also searched for this magic treasure many times, but to no avail. Now all of Yen Fang's hopes were pinned on this magic treasure. She knew that if the Heaven and Earth Rui mirror fell into Ziyuan's hands, it would definitely be her nightmare. She would never be able to surpass Li Yunyang in her life. Yen Fang couldn't help but say loudly, "I am your Shimi and her Shirshu. You would rather give it to her than to me? Besides, as long as I recover my female body, I will immediately return it to her. Don't you believe me? Do you want me to swear to God?" Wang Yuanshan knew that although Yen Fang had a strong personality, she was also a person who kept her promises. She had a heroic character and would definitely do what she had promised, no matter how difficult and dangerous it was. He thought for a moment and sighed. "Well, I'll tell you. But you'd better make it clear to Ziyuan. Don't have any grudges between you and your nephew because of such a thing." Uncle and nephew? Yen Fang couldn't help but look at her male body. She couldn't help laughing strangely, and tears slowly flowed down her cheeks. Now we're really uncle and nephew. The seniority in the cultivation world originated from the tradition of favoring men over women in ancient times. Although she was a woman, she still called her Shirshu or Shirbua instead of Shirgu or Shirsun. Yen Fang's words were full of pain, and Wang Yuanshan sighed when he heard them. But he didn't know that Yen Fang's temperament had changed greatly in the past 10 years. In order to get revenge, not only had her personality changed, but even her appearance and gender had changed. But the only thing that hadn't changed was her love for Wang Yuanshan. It was just that she was now a man, so she didn't dare to tell Wang Yuanshan about her feelings. She just wanted to obtain the Cosmos Rui mirror, take revenge and regain her womanhood. Wang Yuanshan hesitated for a long time. In the end, his feelings for his shimmy overcame his worries. He also believed that his shimmy would keep her promise, so he told Yan Fang the location of the treasure. When Yan Fang heard Wang Yuanshan tell her the location of the mirror of heaven and earth, she was ecstatic and immediately wanted to fly to the treasure. But she moved. After taking 2 steps, she couldn't help but turn around and look at Wang Yuanshan in a daze. She knew that once she left, it was very likely that she would never see her Shirdi again. She couldn't help but ask, Shirdij, did you ever like that woman named Yan Fang? Yan Fang was now beyond recognition. Seeing that her Shirdi was still handsome and elegant, she couldn't help but feel inferior and didn't even dare to ask directly. Wang Yuanshan naturally knew Yan Fang's pain. For a moment, his eyes were blurred as if he remembered the time when he and his shimmy had just met 10 years ago. At that time he was a handsome young man and she was a budding beauty. The two of them cultivated day and night. Although they did not officially become Taoist companions, they were extremely close. It was really like the saying, the first time a concubine covers her forehead, the first time a flower is folded in front of the door. My husband rides a bamboo horse and goes around the bed to play with the green plums. They lived together for a long time and there is no grudge between them. Although Wang Yuanshan was a great cultivator who had long seen through the world of mortals and was only one step away from ascending, even immortals had their own fetters. How could the feelings of the mortal world be forgotten just because one said so? Wang Yuanshan recalled the past and was stunned for a moment. He whispered in a daze, 10 years of romance, 10 years of dreams, one happiness is all for nothing. Forget all this shimmy. Yan Fang listened to Wang Yuanshan's words and repeated in a low voice, 10 years of romance, 10 years of dreams, one happiness is all for nothing. The more she whispered, the more her heart ached. She couldn't help but burst into tears. In the end she covered her face and ran down the mountain. Yan Fang cried all the way and ran all the way. She covered her face with her hands and couldn't see the road. She didn't know how many times she fell along the way, but she quickly got up and continued to move forward. She cried all the way and ran all the way to the location of the treasure. Yan Fang knew that even if she was heartbroken, she had to get the mirror of heaven and earth. As long as she had this powerful magical weapon in hand, there was still hope for everything. Li Yunyang and Ziyuan had already set off. She had to get the mirror of heaven and earth before them. Mount Longhu covered an area of more than 200 square kilometers and had 99 peaks. If Wang Yuanshan didn't tell her which peak it was hidden on, she might not be able to find this palm-sized mirror even if she searched for it for a lifetime. What's more, with Wang Yuanshan's cultivation, if he wanted to hide something, he could easily hide it under the ground. Even if others dug 3 feet into the ground, they would never be able to find it. Yan Fang had looked for this powerful magical weapon several times before. She had almost turned this side peak upside down, but Wang Yuanshan had hidden it on an extremely inconspicuous side peak. This side peak had no name. It was neither high nor short among the 99 peaks. Yan Fang followed Wang Yuanshan's guidance and went all the way up the east side of the mountain road. She came to a steep rock face. She flew to the middle of the rocky mountain and took a closer look. Sure enough, she saw a mountainside jungle covered by vegetation as Wang Yuanshan had said. She flew over and pushed aside the branches and grass to take a look, only to see a small cave in front of her. The cave was located on a steep slope of a cliff. It was almost impossible for a human to climb it. Only cultivators could fly up and take a closer look. Moreover, the outside of the cave was covered with dense branches and leaves. If she didn't point it out specifically, she wouldn't be able to see anything unusual even if she flew close. Yan Fang flew in and felt that the cave was so narrow that it could only accommodate one person walking side by side. If she wanted to go inside, she had to bend down and lower her head. Yan Fang cast a spell and walked inside with a ball of flame in her palm. After walking for about 10 meters, she saw an inconspicuous stone spit out from the moss-covered rock wall. The stone looked like a person's nose. Although it had a strange shape, it did not attract any attention in this cave full of strange rocks. At this time, Yan Fang squatted down in front of the stone and quickly dug the hard stone ground with her hands. If she hadn't cultivated to the Yangshan phase at this time, the hard stone surface would have been difficult for her. She couldn't dig the hard stone ground at all. Yan Fang gritted her teeth and dug the ground with her bare hands. After digging down about half a meter, she saw a beautifully carved, palm-sized round mirror lying quietly in the pit. Although the mirror was covered with dust, Yen Fang could still feel an inexplicable power lingering around the powerful magical weapon, which was faintly discernible. Yen Fang was shocked. She quickly picked up the mirror, and then carefully touched the pit with her hands. After confirming that there was nothing, she ran out of the cave. She knew that Ziyuan and Li Yunyang were also rushing here. It was really a blessing for her to get the mirror of heaven and earth before they did. Yen Fang did not dare to stop. She took the mirror of heaven and earth and flew far away before she dared to stop. Carefully looking at the magic treasure in her bosom, her body trembled violently. She was so happy that she could not restrain herself. She could not help but raise her head and laugh out loud. This laughter was full of bitterness and sorrow, but also joy and excitement. She knew that her misfortune had finally turned for the better, and her luck had finally turned for the better. With the mirror of heaven and earth, the #1 powerful magical weapon in the cultivation world, it would not be a dream for her to break through the Jinshin, cross the Thunder Retribution, and even reach the Golden Immortal level in the future. Yen Fang reached out to press the surface of the mirror and poured her Jinshi into it with trembling hands, trying to make the powerful magical weapon recognize her as its master. However, Yen Fang was shocked to find that no matter how much Jinshi she injected, the mirror of heaven and earth did not move or react at all, as if it was just the most ordinary mirror. This is impossible. Yen Fang couldn't help widening her eyes. She shouted hoarsely, "How could it not recognize me as its master?" Yen Fang couldn't help but try again, but she could feel that there was a great power hidden in the mirror. However, this power was separated by an inexplicable thing. She could feel it but she couldn't touch it. It seemed that there was an insurmountable moat between the powerful magical weapon and her. Yen Fang suddenly remembered that she had once asked her senior brother, why didn't he use the mirror of heaven and earth? What was his answer at that time? By the way, he had sighed and said, "I'm not the destined person for this mirror, so I can't use it." Could it be? Am I not the destined person? In an instant, Yen Fang's heart was empty and extremely lost. She had finally gotten the mirror of heaven and earth after so much effort. She had thought that she could save everything. Unexpectedly, as Wang Yuanshan had said before they parted, it was really 10 years of romantic dreams, 10 years of happiness for nothing. Chapter 797. Although she found that the heaven and earth Rui mirror did not recognize her as its master, Yen Fang did not intend to give up. She carefully looked at the mirror in her hand and saw that it was oval in shape, surrounded by exquisite copper patterns. Although it had been buried for a long time and lacked maintenance, the copper mirror was protected by a mysterious force and had not been oxidized. On the contrary, the mirror exuded an aura of vicissitudes. These patterns were either the outlines of auspicious clouds or lotus thrones, but the most eye-catching one was the image of a graceful female heaven immortal behind the mirror. Her face was a little blurry, but one could vaguely tell that she was a very beautiful woman. Yen Fang pressed her hand on the front of the mirror. As soon as she channeled her true essence, ripples would appear on the surface of the mirror. However, no matter how much Yen Fang channeled, the ripples would only gently form layer after layer of ripples. It was like a stone falling into a deep pool. Besides creating circles of ripples, there was no other reaction. Damn it! Why is it like this? This time, Yen Fang injected her Jinshi for nearly half an hour, but she never noticed anything unusual. Ordinary powerful magical weapons were like horses. Some were hot-tempered while others were docile. But if one wanted to control these powerful magical weapons, one had to first get on the horse and compete with it. Those with great strength and skills could naturally subdue powerful magical weapons. However, there was no reaction from the continuous input of Jinshi. It was as if she was riding on a stone horse, and the powerful magical weapon did not pay attention to her at all. Such a situation was unique and extremely abnormal. Yen Fang was surprised and anxious. She wished she could break the heaven and earth Rui mirror in her hand and smash it to see what was going on inside. It was not easy to get the heaven and earth Rui mirror, but she could not use it. It was like holding the most valuable treasure in the world in her hand, but she could not exchange it for a penny. She could only look at it but could not get any benefits from it. It was purely a decoration and a collection. It was really painful and frustrating. Yen Fang gritted her teeth and carefully hid the heaven and earth Rui mirror. Then she turned around and flew to the side peak where Wang Yuanshan was. At this time, Li Yunyang and Ziyuan didn't expect that Yen Fang would be able to hear the news of Wang Yuanshan in Desangxian and quietly follow them. After going up the mountain, Ziyuan was in a panic and didn't pay attention to the situation around her, so she didn't notice Yen Fang's existence. The two of them slowly walked side by side on the mountain road. Li Yundong coaxed Ziyuan along the way, picking some irrelevant happy things to tell her, trying to make her happier. Li Yundong was extremely eloquent. After coaxing for a while, he finally coaxed Ziyuan to stop crying. Although she did not break into a smile, the gloomy expression on her face faded a lot. Ziyuan lowered her head all the way and did not speak. It was not until they reached the foot of the mountain where Wang Yuanshan had hidden the treasures that she raised her head and said softly, "Li Yundong, thank you for talking to me. I'm much better now. Let's go up and get the Cosmos Compliance Mirror." Seeing that Ziyuan had finally spoken, he couldn't help but smile and say, "Thank God you're finally talking to me." He wanted to distract Ziyuan's attention, so he said, "By the way, what kind of powerful magical weapon is this Cosmos Compliance Mirror? Why have I never heard of it?" Ziyuan looked up at the steep rock wall of the mountain and confirmed the direction. She said softly, "The Mirror of Heaven and Earth is a powerful magical weapon specially used by Taoists for cultivation. It can adjust the direction a cultivator wants to improve according to the user's will. Even without the guidance of a famous teacher, without a precious book, and without any elixirs, one can still cultivate a divine skill that can penetrate the heaven and earth." Li Yundong gasped. He was an experienced person, so he naturally knew that if Su Chan and Ziyuan hadn't led him into the sect and given him careful guidance, it would have been impossible for him to make rapid progress in cultivation. Moreover, if he hadn't practiced the heavenly Jindan technique, he wouldn't have been able to defeat the cultivators of various sects on Mount Tianlong. If he couldn't defeat these people, there would naturally be no Li Yundong in the future. Since ancient times, the cultivation world was the same as the martial arts world and the medical world. If one wanted to achieve amazing results, then one had to acknowledge a famous teacher. If one casually found a teacher and bowed his head to acknowledge him, then the result would be that he or she would vanish from the masses. The reason why Zhao Zilong was able to go in and out of Changban Slope was that he had worshipped Tong Yuan, the best spear master in the world at that time. The reason why Li Shuwen was able to be invincible in the world with a long spear was that he had worshipped Zhang Jingxing, the fourth-generation grandmaster of the Baji school. Then, under the recommendation of his master, he had worshipped Huang Shihai, the third-generation grandmaster, and finally mastered the invincible spear technique. Similarly, Sun Lutong, who was known as the best in the world, had also worshipped Li Kueyuan, a famous teacher in Hebei province, at the age of 13. Then he had been recommended by his master and worshipped Gui Yunshin, a master of Xingyi, who was known as half-step bursting fist conquering the world. Later, Sun Lutong had worshipped Qing Tinghua, a famous master of Baguazhang, and Hao Weijin, a famous master of Tai Chi. Then he had received guidance from Song Shirong and Che Yizhai, such great masters. That was how he became the famous best in the world in the future. It could be seen that without the guidance of a famous teacher, it was as difficult as ascending to heaven to achieve amazing achievements. Even if Emperor Huang Xinyuan wanted to learn cultivation, he had to ask Qi Bo, "If you want to cultivate, what should you do first?" Qi Bo said that if you want to cultivate, you must first worship a famous teacher. Without the guidance of a famous teacher, you can't become an immortal even if you cultivate for a lifetime. Therefore, Emperor Huang Xinyuan took a bath and fasted, and respectfully worshipped Qi Bo as his teacher. That was how the famous inner canon of the Yellow Emperor appeared in the Chinese cultivation world and medical world. Li Yunyang knew that his cultivation path seemed to be smooth sailing, but in fact he had a lot of opportunities along the way. Every time he encountered a bottleneck or a difficult time, he had a famous teacher to guide him and help him. He didn't dare to imagine that without Ziyuan's guidance, the heavenly Jindan technique, Zhang Zhishuan's guidance, and Rinyuan Jindan and Diyuan Jindan, it would have been impossible for him to reach the top phase of Jinshin in just 1 year. Since ancient times there had been a saying, "The poor study and the rich learn martial arts," which meant that the poor study literature. Only the rich were qualified to practice martial arts, not only because practicing martial arts required a lot of nutrition and the poor could not afford so much food, but also because practicing martial arts required a lot of money to worship a famous teacher. Without the guidance of a famous teacher, no matter how smart a genius was, it was impossible for him to understand the mystery and difficulty of cultivation by himself. The poor studied literature for 10 years. Even if they didn't worship a famous teacher, they still had a chance to be on the high list and reach the sky in one day. However, it was absolutely impossible for them to practice martial arts. Even a rare genius like Zhang Sanfeng had once studied under Taoist Fiery Dragon and ancestor Qin Tuan. That was how he was able to establish the Wu-Tang sect in the future. But Ziyuan said, This mirror of heaven and earth can allow any cultivator to cultivate a divine skill that can penetrate the heavens and the earth without the need to worship a famous teacher, read the classics, or take pills. What kind of concept is this? Li Yunyang was stunned by Ziyuan's understatement for a while. After a while, he said in surprise, "There is such a magical weapon in the world? I have to take a good look at it." The two of them flew up the mountain together. According to Wang Yuanshan's instructions, Ziyuan flew halfway up the mountain and searched carefully. However, when she took a look, she found that the branches and grass covering the entrance of the cave had obviously been moved by someone else. She was shocked and blurted out, "Someone has been here." Li Yunyang's expression also froze. He moved and got into the cave. After taking a closer look, there were indeed footprints on the ground. His heart sank and he said, "Yes, and it seems that they have just arrived." Ziyuan was very anxious and hurriedly said, "Hurry up, go inside and have a look. If this person can find this place, I'm afraid that the mirror of heaven and earth has already been taken away." The two of them hurried inside. When they arrived at the place where the treasure was hidden, they saw a big pit on the ground, which was empty. There was a buzzing sound in Ziyuan's mind. Her body swayed and she almost fell to the ground. Li Yunyang, who was beside her, was quick to react and immediately supported her with both hands. Ziyuan was in a panic and subconsciously whispered, "What should we do? The mirror of heaven and earth has been stolen." "Oh, who stole it?" Li Yundong's heart also tightened, but he knew that he couldn't panic. If he did, Ziyuan would completely panic. This fairy, who was usually calm and composed, was in a mess at this time. Li Yundong advised, "This person probably left not long ago. Let's search around quickly and see if we can find him." Hearing this, Ziyuan's spirit was lifted. She immediately gritted her teeth and rushed out, searching around like crazy. Li Yundong also followed her out of the cave. Seeing that she was running around like a headless fly in a panic, he couldn't help but hold her down with both hands and say in a deep voice, "Ziyuan, calm down. You look in the east and I'll look in the west. This way the chances will be higher." Only then did Ziyuan calm down. She took a deep breath and nodded. "Okay." The two of them searched separately, but Mount Longhu was so big. How could they find anyone? Even if they saw anyone, they were either Taoist priests of Mount Longhu or wanderers. How could there be anyone with a strange expression? After searching for a long time, they had no choice but to get together again. Li Yundong saw that Ziyuan was burning with anxiety and worry, so he couldn't help but persuade her. "Ziyuan, don't worry. Since this person knows the location of the treasure and stole the powerful magical weapon before us, it's very likely that he overheard the conversation between you and Wang Yuanshan. Think about it. Did you notice anyone on the mountain before?" Ziyuan shook her head and said, "I was so confused at that time that I didn't notice these things." Li Yundong thought calmly for a moment and said, "You didn't notice, but I believe that Wang Yuanshan must have noticed. Let's go and ask him quickly. Maybe he will know." Ziyuan sighed softly and said, "I'm so confused that I don't have the heart to think about it. Just tell me what to do. I'll follow you." Li Yundong smiled slightly and said, "Well, let's go now." After that, he took Ziyuan to the side peak where Wang Yuanshan was. Early this morning, I received very bad news. My father-in-law had a minor stroke and my mother-in-law's blood test indicators were rising day by day, reaching the standard for cancer. My wife asked for leave to go back to Shanghai and I had to go to Beijing, so I couldn't go back to Shanghai. I had to rush back to Suzhou from Beijing on Tuesday. After dealing with the update, I could go to Shanghai on Wednesday. Things are all coming together, so I'll try my best to keep updating. Alas, I hope everyone can understand. Chapter 798. Li Yundong took Ziyuan and flew all the way back to the side peak where Wang Yuanshan was imprisoned. However, Li Yundong was surprised to find that in less than 2 hours after they left, this side peak was already full of Taoist priests in Taoist robes. Especially when Li Yundong and Ziyuan walked to the foot of the mountain, a Taoist priest immediately came up to them and asked with a vigilant face, "This is not the tourist area. You can't enter at will." Mount Longhu was very large with 99 peaks. There were often groups of backpackers climbing around this mountain. The Taoist priest saw that Li Yundong and Ziyuan were both dressed in ordinary clothes, so he thought they were tourists who liked to wander around. At a glance, Li Yundong saw that the Taoist priest's temples were bulging, and his eyes were shining like light bulbs. In particular, his muscles were like dragons and even the loose Taoist robe could not hide them. He looked extremely powerful. The Taoist priest held a horsetail whisk in one hand and hid the other in his sleeve. He showed an extremely aggressive and hostile aura. Li Yundong hadn't expected that less than 2 hours after he left the mountain would be under martial law. He was stunned for a moment. Yu Ziyuan looked at each other and asked, I just left here. Why can't I enter the mountain now? The Taoist priest had never seen Li Yundong and Ziyuan before. He looked at them carefully and saw that although Li Yundong was no different from ordinary people, he had a different temperament, especially Li Yundong's skin, which was as delicate as porcelain, and his eyes were bottomless. His aura made people not dare to underestimate him. In particular, Ziyuan, who was beside him, had an ethereal aura and a beautiful appearance. She was dazzling. It seemed that she was not an ordinary person. The Taoist priest did not dare to be careless. He frowned slightly and said, Humph, 1 has left and 2 have come. The order to close the mountain has just been issued. If you have anything to do, I can only apologize. Please go back. From today on, this mountain will not be open to the public. But Li Yundong wanted to say more, but Ziyuan suddenly grabbed him and said, Forget it, Li Yundong, let's go first. Li Yundong frowned and walked a few steps back with Ziyuan. But after a while he suddenly turned around and asked, Someone else was here before. Who else? The Taoist said impatiently, He's just a man. Why do you care so much? Li Yundong thought for a moment and asked, How old is this person? What does he look like? What kind of clothes is he wearing? The Taoist priest seemed extremely impatient. He waved his hand and said, I don't remember. Let's go. If you don't leave now, I'm going to kick you out. Li Yundong was a little unhappy and wanted to force his way into the mountain, but when he saw that Ziyuan was just shaking her head at him, he had no choice but to stop asking. After nodding to Ziyuan, the 2 of them slowly walked out of the Taoist's sight. Something's wrong. Why did they seal the mountain right after we left? Moreover, this Taoist priest's cultivation is not low. He seems to be very powerful. The more he thought about it, the stranger he felt. Ziyuan said in a low voice, Obviously, after Wang Yuanshan finished the last thing, the Jingyi school sealed the mountain to prevent the news from leaking out. In addition, they have to protect the absolute love-extinguishing formation to prevent anyone from destroying it. Li Yundong shook his head and said, Although this Taoist priest's cultivation is not low, if they want to protect this magic formation with just these people, it's really a pipe dream. Ziyuan sighed and said, You forget, there's still my master Wang Yuanshan. These people are just sentries. With my master here, who else in the world can break the formation except for the mystical silver fox? Li Yundong was silent and said slowly, Then who do you think the man the Taoist priest mentioned was? Could he be the one who stole the mirror of heaven and earth? Ziyuan thought for a moment and said, It can't be such a coincidence, can it? Maybe he's just an ordinary person who wants to climb the mountain? Li Yundong sighed and said, Then who are we going to find out his whereabouts now? Why didn't you let me rush up and ask Wang Yuanshan just now? Maybe we'll know the answer as long as we ask. Ziyuan shook her head and said, I had already guessed who it was, but the Taoist priest said it was a man just now, so I'm not sure. Li Yundong reacted very quickly and blurted out, You mean Yen Fang? Ziyuan nodded slowly and said, That's right. This person was able to take away the mirror of heaven and earth before us, which means that he just got the news and must have heard the conversation between me and my master. At that time, my master had been talking to me in a normal tone. Only when he told me the location of the treasure did he ask me to lean over. Obviously, he had already noticed that someone was eavesdropping. It's a pity that I was so flustered at that time that I didn't notice this detail. Li Yundong's heart skipped a beat. He continued Ziyuan's words and said, After you left, Wang Yuanshan must have pointed out this person, but he obviously didn't make things difficult for him and even told him the location of the treasure? Ziyuan sighed softly and said, I guess so. There is only one person in the world who can make my master change his decision. This person is his shimmy Yen Fang. Li Yundong suddenly couldn't help but have the urge to laugh out loud. He didn't laugh for anything else but for Yen Fang's perseverance, her stubbornness and stupidity. People can still soar to the sky without relying on famous teachers, classics, and elixirs. Li Yundong laughed and said, That's right. Even if this powerful magical weapon is in my hands, it will just be icing on the cake. It can't play any obvious role. Moreover, even if this powerful magical weapon is obtained, it may not be useful. It will take a long time to cultivate. Ziyuan also knew that Li Yundong was now one of the top masters in the world. Before he broke through to the Jinshin phase, this mirror of heaven and earth was a priceless powerful magical weapon. But now, this powerful magical weapon was not even as useful as the 7 treasure pouch. At this time, hearing Li Yundong's words, Ziyuan suddenly felt a lot more relieved. She smiled and said, "Since you think so, I feel much more at ease. However, Master's powerful magical weapon will eventually be found." Li Yunyang said, "Don't worry. Yin Fang took great pains to get the Qingkuan Rui mirror. Her purpose is to target our Fox Zen school. When the time comes, she will definitely show up. We just need to wait for her to show up." Ziyuan sighed softly and said, "That's the only way. I hope Shu can turn back as soon as possible." Li Yundong smiled and said, "Let's go back. It's time to go back and prepare to steam flour cakes and make dumplings. I haven't tasted your cooking yet." Ziyuan also knew that if Yin Fang wanted to hide, no one in the world would be able to find her. Although she was anxious now, urgent things could be done slowly. The more anxious she was, the calmer she had to be. As Li Yundong had said, since the mirror of heaven and earth might be in Yin Fang's hands, she would definitely come to them when the time came. All they had to do was to spend the new year in peace and then prepare for the Thunder Tribulation. Li Yundong and Ziyuan moved and flew in the direction of Tianan City. Not long after they left, a figure slowly walked out of a forest far away from them. It was Yin Fang. Yin Fang rushed to the foot of the side peak before Li Yundong and Ziyuan. She wanted to ask Wang Yuanshan about it, but she was also stopped by the Taoist priest in charge of guarding and could not enter. However, she did not dare to reveal her identity. When she was about to grit her teeth and force her way in, Li Yundong and Ziyuan happened to arrive. She had to leave quickly and hide. After Li Yundong and Ziyuan left, she dared to show up again. While she was hiding, when Yin Fang returned to the foot of the side peak, she found that the number of Taoist priests patrolling the mountain had doubled. Moreover, all of them were at the top level of Yang spirit. If she met one, she could barely deal with it, but if there were so many, then I'd better run. Yin Fang's heart was filled with hatred. She looked up at the mountain unwillingly and thought to herself, "Shirdi, I won't let you die like this. I will definitely figure out the mystery of the mirror of heaven and earth and come back to save you." Thinking of this, Yin Fang gritted her teeth and disappeared into the dense jungle like a ghost. Thank you for your concern. I didn't sleep well last night. I only slept for 5 hours before I got up to catch the train. I was not in a good state of mind all day. After running outside for a day, I am now staying in the Ibis Hotel in Beijing. The environment is very good, but I am a little too tired. I worked hard and finally didn't stop updating. As for the other update, I can only get up tomorrow morning to make it up. I hope you can understand. Chapter 799. When Li Yundong and Ziyuan returned home in Tianan City, they found that Su Chan and the others had already returned from Desangxian's shop. The people of the Fox Zen school were happily making steamed flour cakes in the living room. Because the flour had been kneaded and fermented yesterday, all the people of the Fox Zen school as well as Zhou Qin and Lin Miao were happily pinching their cakes in the living room. Su Chan and Zhou Qin had no idea that Ziyuan had encountered something that made her heart broken. The two of them were laughing so hard in the living room that their noses and eyes could not be seen. They looked at each other's cakes and they were having a lot of fun. Ruan Hongling was also among them, pinching a cake sullenly. Her mind was not here, so she immediately noticed the return of Li Yundong and Ziyuan. When she heard the sound, she looked up and saw Ziyuan at first glance. She was happy at first, but then her face fell again. She continued to pinch the dough in her hand with a sullen face. When Su Chan, Zhou Qin and the others saw Li Yundong coming back, they all cheered and laughed. Su Chan held the cake in both hands and skipped to Li Yundong. She said with a smile, "Yundong, look, this is the cake I made. Isn't it beautiful?" At a glance, Li Yundong saw that Su Chan's hands were covered in flour, and her face was covered with white flour marks. She looked like a dirty kitten. The flour cake in the girl's hand was a scene. There was a small bridge and a willow tree in the scene. Next to the bridge, under the willow tree, there were two little people. The two little people were a man and a woman. The man was standing on the small bridge, carrying the girl on his back. The two of them were close to each other. The girl held the boy tightly with both hands, wishing she could rub herself into the boy's body. Although Su Chan was sometimes careless, she was clever and deft. The flour cakes she made not only had tiny characters and patterns on the small bridge, but even the leaves of the willow tree were made into willow leaves by her small scissors. The two dough figurines had delicate facial features. Although they hadn't been colored yet at first glance, others felt that the two dough figurines were vivid, as if they could jump up on their own if they were given a breath of immortal qi. As soon as Li Yundong saw the cake Su Chan was making, he laughed. He knew that this was the scene when he had found Su Chan again in Shantang, Dongwu City. This was also something that only the two of them knew. Li Yundong smiled at Su Chan, his smile extremely gentle. Su Chan also looked at Li Yundong, smiled sweetly and said, "Yundong, did I do a good job?" The little girl usually got along with Ziyuan and Zhou Qin. The two of them were not weaker than her in the areas that the little girl was good at. In many areas that the little girl was not good at, they made the little girl feel ashamed of her inferiority. But today, when it came to making flour cakes, she was the only one who was good at it. She had skillfully made this vivid, exquisite and beautiful flour cake. Su Chan was both proud and happy, so as soon as she saw Li Yundong, she ran over to ask for praise. The smile on her face was even more happy, as if she had already heard Li Yundong's praise. The eager look in her eyes seemed to be saying, "Praise me, come and praise me." Li Yundong laughed in his heart. After carefully looking at the cake, he pretended to be in deep thought, frowned and shook his head. Su Chan's heart skipped a beat when she saw this. She suddenly asked uneasily, "What's wrong? Is it not good?" Li Yundong's face was tense and he sighed. "No, it's very bad." The smile on Su Chan's face suddenly froze. The greater the expectation, the greater the disappointment. The little girl looked back at the cake in the hands of the others and felt very wronged. She thought to herself, "They are all not as good as me. Why does Yundong still say that mine is not good?" The little girl couldn't help but burst into tears. Tears the size of beans kept rolling back and forth in her eyes, as if they were about to burst in the next second. Seeing the little girl like this, Li Yundong held back his laughter and deliberately sighed seriously. "Your cake is so beautiful and exquisite. How can I have the heart to eat it later? Do you want to steam it and use it as a tribute?" When Su Chan heard this, she realized that her master was teasing her. She smiled through her tears, rolled her eyes at Li Yundong, and said in an extremely coquettish tone, "You're so annoying. You only know how to play with me." This sentence was unintentional, but Li Yundong was listening attentively. He quickly blinked at the little girl and his eyes were ambiguous and smiling. Su Chan immediately understood, and her pretty face turned red. With a flushed face, Su Chan stamped her feet and said, "I'm going to ignore you. I'm not done yet." As she said this, she lowered her head and slipped back to the table like a thief. She took the small scissors and carved something on the cake, but her heart was in a mess because of Li Yundong's teasing. Her heart was flustered and her hands were a little out of control. She almost cut off the man's head with the scissors. At this time, Zhou Qin and the others also greeted Li Yundong and Ziyuan with a smile. As soon as Ziyuan returned, she was infected by the happy atmosphere, and the depression in her heart was temporarily swept away. She temporarily put her unhappiness aside, forced herself to cheer up, and nodded to everyone with a smile. She went to the kitchen to wash her hands, rolled up her sleeves and was ready to make a cake. Li Yundong came to the table with a smile and looked at them one by one. Zhou Qin's craftsmanship was not as good as Su Chan's, and she also knew that the most difficult thing to make was a person, so she was very sensible and didn't ask for a snub. She made a burning thumb pot magic treasure, and now she was carving around it with a toothpick. The little foxes also had good skills. Some of them were making immortals of the 8 immortals, while others were making demons and ghosts. Even the sullen Ruan Hongling had made a man herself. He was dressed in a Taoist robe and had a long sword on his back. He looked elegant and elegant. It seemed to be Wang Yuanshan. Li Yundong couldn't help laughing. "What are you making? Don't make it too beautiful. It's like a work of art. Who would be willing to eat it later?" His words made everyone laugh. Li Yundong glanced around and saw that Lin Miao, who had blonde hair and blue eyes, was a little evasive. He smiled and said, "Lin Miao, show me your work of art." Lin Miao's face suddenly turned red. She hid her hands behind her back and refused to take them out. The little foxes on the side also turned their faces away and secretly laughed. Seeing this, Li Yundong became more and more curious. He said with a smile, "Lin Miao, it doesn't matter. You haven't made it before, so it's normal that you can't make it well. The important thing is to participate. It's not like you have to make a work of art to participate in a competition." Only then did Lin Miao take out her hands hesitantly from behind her and hold the dough ball in her hands in front of Li Yundong's eyes. Li Yundong took a look and suddenly gasped. "Wow, what is this?" He saw that the dough ball had been squeezed out of shape. Especially when Lin Miao had pinched it with her 10 fingers just now, it had been pinched into circles around it. It really looked like some kind of excrement. Li Yundong's expression was strange and his eyes were blank. Lin Miao's face was so red that it almost bled. She couldn't wait to throw away the dough ball in her hand, dig open the ground and find a crack to hide in. Zhou Qin, who had always had a good relationship with her, tried to smooth things over for her. She said, "Master, just now cook. Lin Miao made a puppy. It's very beautiful." When the people around heard this, they all burst out laughing. Lin Miao had indeed wanted to make a puppy before, but she had never made such a thing before. She was not a cultivator like the others, and her control of strength was exquisite. How could she make something decent? It was not easy for her to make one, and Ling Yu, the little fox next to her, saw it. She blurted out, "Ah, is that a pig? It looks like it." When Lin Miao heard this, her face turned green. She hurriedly explained, No, I made a dog, a dog." When the other little foxes heard this, they also gathered around. These little girls were usually noisy, and they would argue with each other for a long time over a small matter. Now that they saw the dog that Lin Miao had made, their opinions were surprisingly unified. They all said that it was a pig. Lin Miao was depressed when she heard this, so she had to find Su Chan, who was the best at cooking, and let her judge. However, Su Chan saw the flour cake in her hand and blurted out in surprise, "Ah? Why did you make a pig? It's so ugly." Lin Miao burst into tears and immediately kneaded the dog in her hand into dough. At this time, Li Yundong and Zi Yuan had just returned. After listening to Ling Yu's story, Li Yundong couldn't help laughing in his heart. The smile on his face became even wider, making Lin Miao feel ashamed. Su Chan, who had been teased by Li Yundong, felt a little sympathy for Lin Miao. She couldn't stand it, so she quietly poked Li Yundong, coughed dryly and said, "In my opinion, the one Lin Miao made is a good flour cake. Otherwise, who would be willing to eat it when everyone makes it more beautiful? We can't just sit back and watch when we make it, right?" As soon as Su Chan spoke, the other little foxes also smiled and said yes. Everyone took the opportunity to leave the stage. After all, they were all on the same side. They lived under the same roof and would see each other all the time. Why bother? Why bother? Li Yundong also tried hard to hold back his laughter and said seriously, "Yes, I agree with Comrade Su Chan very much. What she said is very reasonable. Although the shape of Comrade Lin Miao's flour cake is simple, it is easy to understand, concise and skillful. It combines practicality and artistry, and can be called a model of flour cake of this generation." As he spoke, he became more and more excited. He pointed to the flour cake in Lin Miao's hand and said, "Look, although the shape is irregular, it is full of the style of postmodern magic. The unique shape also has the style of Picasso, abstract and thought-provoking. Look at the shape, it looks like an elegant cloud. Such an elegant cloud really allows one's imagination to run wild and let one's imagination run wild." Li Yundong was very eloquent, and he had praised the extremely ugly dough to the sky. Lin Miao didn't know that Li Yundong had a bad habit of teasing people seriously, so she was stunned by Li Yundong's words. She subconsciously looked at her hands, and a little curiosity appeared on her face. She was no longer so embarrassed. She thought to herself, "Could it be that I really made a mistake?" But Lin Miao didn't know that Li Yundong's bad habit had been deeply experienced by Su Chan, Zhou Qin, Zi Yuan, and the others. Even the little foxes knew about Li Yundong's habit. They all turned away slightly and tried hard to hold back their laughter. Even Zi Yuan couldn't help but keep a straight face, and the corners of her mouth curled up slightly. After Li Yundong praised her for a while, he took a deep look at Lin Miao and said, "Lin Miao, you have just become my disciple, and you have already made such an earth-shattering work. I am really touched, so I have decided to sing a song for you to commemorate your virginity." Lin Miao was a little confused by Li Yundong's words. She just looked at him blankly, but she saw Li Yundong take a deep breath and sing, "There is a cloud made of rain in the wind, a cloud made of rain. A cloud made of rain. A lump, a lump." When Su Chan and the others heard this, they looked at the dough in Lin Miao's hands again. "This shape, this pattern, isn't it a lump?" They finally couldn't hold it in any longer and burst into laughter. I didn't sleep well again. I woke up at 5 o'clock. I tossed and turned and I really couldn't sleep. I'd better get up and make up for the chapter 1 missed yesterday. Alas, I really can't afford to be hurt by the sins of a writer. Chapter 800. Chinese was broad and profound. Changing a word would have a completely different artistic conception. Li Yundong casually changed a word, and the lyrics of the whole song suddenly had a different meaning. Su Chan, Zi Yuan, and the others looked at the cloud made of rain in Lin Miao's hand with strange looks. They all knew that it would be fine if Li Yundong didn't sing. Once he sang, even if the flour cake was steamed, no one would eat it. At this time Lin Miao really wanted a crack in the ground so that she could hide in it. She blushed and wished she could throw the flour cake in her hand away. Su Chan, who was beside her, held back her laughter and took the flour cake from Lin Miao's hand. With a little pinch of her fingers she made a delicate little cat. She handed it to Lin Miao with a smile and said, "Well, ignore this guy. He only knows how to make fun of people. Let him pinch it himself. Maybe he won't be able to make this cloud." Lin Miao finally had a way out. She smiled at Su Chan with great gratitude, but her eyes didn't dare to look at Li Yundong at all. Li Yundong chuckled and glared at Su Chan, pretending to be angry. "In front of so many people, you actually ruined my show. Do you really want to tear down the roof tiles?" Su Chan made a face at Li Yundong. "If you have the ability, make one yourself." Li Yundong raised his head and laughed. "Are you looking down on me? Look carefully." As he said this, he reached out to grab the dough. Su Chan, who was beside him, immediately pushed him to the bathroom with a smile. "Go wash your hands first. It's so dirty." Li Yundong wiped the little girl's body with his hand a few times with a cheeky smile and said, "Okay, I've wiped it clean." The little girl was so angry that she jumped up and patted the place on her body that had been wiped by Li Yundong. She said angrily, "You're so annoying. Where are your new clothes? I didn't even get them dirty when I made the flour cake, but now you've made them dirty." Li Yundong covered his chest with an exaggerated expression of sadness. He pointed to the face that the little girl had made of him carrying her across the bridge in Shantang and said in a choked voice, "At that time, you grabbed my clothes so dirty that I couldn't wash them clean. Now, I touched you a few times and you despise me so much." Seeing Li Yundong's tearful appearance, Su Chan couldn't help but burst into laughter. She put one hand on her waist and touched Li Yundong's hair with the other hand. She imitated Li Yundong's previous expression and said with a heroic smile, "Don't worry, I won't despise you. In the future, follow me and you'll have a good life." Li Yundong was so angry that he laughed. He slapped Su Chan's round and perky buttocks and pretended to be angry. "You have no respect for your elders. Don't you know that a man's head and a woman's waist can only be looked at but not touched?" The girl seemed to have thought of something. Her eyes sparkled and her cheeks reddened. She leaned over to his ear and giggled. "Didn't I touch your head last night?" Li Yundong naturally knew that it was Xiao Tu, not De Tu. Seeing that the little girl was shamelessly whispering such shameful things to him on such an occasion, his heart warmed up. He pretended to be angry and glared at the little girl, but in a low voice, he said, "I'll let you touch me again tonight." The two of them flirted as if there was no one else around. The little foxes on the side watched with interest, but Zhou Qin and Ziyuan couldn't help feeling a little jealous. Zhou Qin coughed dryly and said, "Master, hurry up and wash your hands. Make a flour cake for us to broaden our horizons." Li Yundong rolled up his sleeves and snorted. "Get ready to stab yourself." "Ahem, no, get ready to open your eyes wide." Zhou Qin burst out laughing. "Are you going to stab yourself in the eyes?" Li Yundong raised his head and laughed. He turned around and went into the bathroom. When he came out, he rolled up his sleeves and prepared to make a flour cake. Everyone knew that Li Yundong's handwriting was ugly, so it was impossible for him to have any artistic talent to make a beautiful flour cake. They were all ready to watch him make a fool of himself. Even Lin Miao, who had been teased by Li Yundong before, quietly looked at Li Yundong from the side. His eyes were full of dissatisfaction. He was waiting for Li Yundong to make a cake that was uglier than him, and then he would laugh at him. Li Yundong looked around and saw that everyone was up to no good and wanted to see the world in chaos. He smiled and made a fist-sized dough with both hands. After kneading it, he pressed it into the shape of a cake. Then he stopped kneading and turned to go into the kitchen. After a while, he came out with a cabbage clapper with only half of it left. Then he pressed it against the dough and uncovered it. A flower shape naturally appeared on the cake. Everyone burst into laughter and jeered, "Cunning, too cunning. This is not a flour cake at all." Li Yundong laughed and said, "A black cat or a white cat is a good cat if it can catch mice." Ruan Hongling, who had been in a bad mood, couldn't help laughing when she saw this. She pursed her lips and quarreled with Li Yundong, which was rare. "You're really shameless. What kind of skill is opportunistic? It will make you lose face if others know about it." Li Yundong asked curiously, "Is my skill in making flour cakes?" Ziyuan was most afraid of Ruan Hongling and Li Yundong bickering. At this time she hurriedly came out to smooth things over. She smiled and said, "Don't talk so much. This kind of flour cake is for eating. Let's hurry up and steam it. It's time to eat." Ruan Hongling snorted and muttered in a low voice, "People are taking sides, but you only know how to take sides." Ziyuan was flustered when she heard this. She couldn't help but look at Su Chan and then glared at Ruan Hongling. However, Ruan Hongling turned her head away and whispered, "Isn't that so?" Ziyuan was angry, but she couldn't lose her temper at this time. Fortunately, Su Chan and the little foxes were busy making flour cakes again. Their hands were nimble, and they quickly made one exquisite and beautiful flour cake after another. Lin Miao, who was standing to one side, was full of envy. She really wanted to try making another one by herself. She looked eager, but she was afraid that she would be laughed at if she didn't make it well. Seeing her like this, Su Chan smiled and pinched a ball of dough, then handed it to Lin Miao. "Here, take it." Lin Miao retracted her hand and quickly shook her head with her hands behind her back. "No, I really won't make it." Su Chan smiled and said, "Oh, everyone has their own strengths. What's so strange about not being able to make a cake? I can't even cook well. Now Yundong doesn't even allow me to get close to the kitchen. I hate it." As she said this, she wrinkled her cute little nose at Li Yundong, looking cute and innocent. Li Yundong couldn't help laughing. "You're good. You actually exposed your shortcomings. If I were you, I would be embarrassed to say such things." Su Chan said angrily, "I'm helping you enlighten your disciple." Li Yundong smiled and said, "Okay, Sister Bosom, go on." Su Chan was a little unhappy. She stamped her feet and said, "I'm not a big sister. I'm not that big. I'm a bosom lady." This sentence made Li Yundong laugh so hard that he almost threw his head back and died. Tears were about to come out of his eyes. He said breathlessly, Well, you are a considerate lady." Ziyuan and Zhou Qin also suddenly laughed so hard that they almost passed out. The two of them hurriedly turned around and trembled with laughter. All the members of the Fox Zen school had been in the secular world for a long time, so they naturally knew what this bosom lady was. They all laughed so hard that they cried out. At first, Su Chan was a little confused. She stared at these guys who were laughing so hard with her big eyes wide open. But soon she came to her senses and blushed with shame. She covered her face and went into her room. Li Yundong laughed so hard that his stomach hurt. After he managed to hold back his laughter, he went into the room to coax Su Chan. However, no matter how Li Yundong coaxed Su Chan, she just buried her head in the pillow like an ostrich and refused to go out again. Li Yundong held back his laughter and said, "How long are you going to hide in the pillow like this? Won't you eat the cake later?" Su Chan buried her head in the pillow and said in a muffled voice, No. You bully me, you only know how to bully me." Li Yundong's face twitched with laughter and he cried out in grievance, "I didn't. You said that you were bosom lady." Su Chan was so angry that she turned her head and pounced on Li Yundong, scratching and biting him. "You're so annoying, I hate you so much. If you say that again, I'll bite you to death." Li Yundong laughed, held the girl's soft and slender waist and whispered in her ear, "Okay, come and bite me at night." Li Yundong emphasized the word bite, and Su Chan naturally understood what it meant. Her pretty face turned red and she rolled her eyes at Li Yundong. "I'll bite you to death at night." Li Yundong chuckled and tapped her nose. "'Kay, I'll be waiting." The two of them chatted in private shamelessly. Outside, Ziyuan and the others were busy preparing the steamed cake. After Li Yundong finally coaxed Su Chan, he walked out of the room and saw that the steamed cake had already begun in the kitchen. Lin Miao stood aside and looked enviously at Ziyuan, who was busy skillfully in the kitchen. Li Yundong walked over and said with a smile, "What's wrong? Haven't you done it before?" Lin Miao shook her head with a face full of shame and said, "Well, I've never done these things before." As she said this, she looked at Li Yundong timidly and asked in a low voice, "Master, am I a terrible disciple? Isn't it a little too late for me to start cultivating at this age? I heard that the younger you are, the better you are." Li Yundong shook his head with a smile and said, "What's too early? I was already 20 when I started cultivating. At your age, why are you in such a hurry?" Bill Gates became the richest man in the world at the age of 39, Qin Tianxiao became the richest man in China at the age of 31, Sun Zhongshan founded the Xinjiang Association at the age of 28, Sun Quan occupied Jiangdong at the age of 19, Ding Junhui won the world championship at the age of 15, Deng Bor won an Oscar at the age of 7, Beethoven began composing at the age of 4, and the Calabash brothers began fighting monsters when they were born. Tell me, who do you want to compete with? Lin Miao was also a smart person. She understood the meaning of Li Yundong's words. She smiled a little embarrassedly and said, "I know, I will be down to earth and learn." Li Yundong nodded, rolled up his sleeves with a smile and began to help. With Li Yundong's help, Ziyuan soon brought the flour cakes to the table one by one. Everyone gathered together and had a delicious meal. The little girl also ran out with a shy face. When Li Yundong was not paying attention, she grabbed a piece of flour cake and went into the room, refusing to come out again. Li Yundong couldn't help laughing and could only shake his head. After the meal, the group of people went back to their rooms. Zhou Qin was still cultivating by herself, Ziyuan and Ruan Hongling were whispering in their own rooms, and the little foxes were also meditating in their own rooms. It was not until late at night that Li Yundong's unlocked door was pushed open. The little girl secretly poked her head in from outside. She saw Li Yundong sitting cross-legged on the bed, looking at her with a smile and saying, "Ah, it's Miss Jinxin." The little girl closed the door behind her and snorted, "You're so annoying." "It's Sister Jinxin." Li Yundong smiled and said, "Thank you, Sister Jinxin. Please let Miss Jinxin come." Su Chan and Li Yundong had been intimate with each other for the whole night. Although they hadn't reached the last step, they had done a lot to please each other. The little girl had tasted the sweetness, so she was naturally very happy and excited. She got into Li Yundong's arms, raised her neck and said to Li Yundong pitifully, "I'm so pitiful. I'm a big sister during the day and a miss at night." Li Yundong couldn't help but burst into laughter. He hugged the little girl dotingly and rubbed his nose against her cheek. "Silly," he said. "Just treat me as your mistress, okay?" Su Chan made a face and said, "You're so annoying. It sounds so bad. Say something else." Li Yundong laughed and said, Okay, Miss Jinxin is here. Little girl, I'm waiting for you to bite me to death." Su Chan blushed and giggled. "You're so shameless. You only know how to think about this kind of thing." As she said this, her eyes turned and her eyes were as charming as silk. After pulling back her hair, she took a bite, I updated very late. Sorry because I came back even later. I'll get up tomorrow morning to make up for the second update. I really can't stand it, so I'm going to sleep. Chapter 801. After the little girl and her master were done, she lay lazily in his arms. Her body was curled up like a kitten, and she said softly with a slightly nasal voice, "Master, when can we dual cultivate?" Just as Ao Wushuang had once said, when love was aroused, desire was aroused. Su Chan loved Li Yundong very much, and the two of them were willing and had no scruples. However, when the little girl was burning with desire and wanted to make love to Li Yundong refused. Seeing the girl's charming appearance, Li Yundong deliberately pretended to be puzzled. "Aren't we doing dual cultivation now?" Su Chan gently hit Li Yundong with her fist and said angrily, "You're so annoying. This is not dual cultivation. Besides, even if it is, it's just a small dual cultivation." Li Yundong chuckled and said, "Oh, do you want to do dual cultivation so much?" The two of them were talking in private. Although they had done the most shameful things in the past, Su Chan still blushed. She turned her head away in embarrassment and said angrily, "You're so annoying. You know the answer. You say it as if you don't want to." Li Yundong's face tightened and he said seriously, "Amit Ba, my 5 dragons embracing pillar magic kung fu has reached the sublime realm. I don't know anything about dual cultivation. Why don't you give me some advice, benefactress?" Su Chan couldn't help laughing. "Ba, how can there be a perverted monk like you in the world? You're so shameless. Haven't you given me enough advice just now?" Li Yundong said with a shy face, "Didn't someone say that they wanted to do dual cultivation?" Su Chan was ashamed and said angrily, "You're so annoying. Dual cultivation is also a kind of cultivation. Why does it sound so dirty to you?" Li Yundong laughed and said, "Are you anxious?" "Humph, when this old man wanted it back then, I had all kinds of excuses and reasons. Now, I'll let you understand the feeling of anxiety and suffering. When you've cultivated the 9 white bone claw to the 9th heavenly layer, then come and compete with my 5 dragons embracing pillar." The two of them laughed for a while and Su Chan felt drowsy, but she still forced herself to talk to her master. Li Yundong saw that she was really sleepy, so he said softly, "If you're tired, go to sleep. Why don't you go back to your room?" The little girl and her master were very intimate, and they couldn't wait to be together every second. Now that the heat was coming, how could she be willing to leave? She wriggled in his arms and said coquettishly, "No, I want you to hold me to sleep." Li Yundong couldn't help laughing. He held the little girl in his arms as if he were holding a large pet. He patted her back with one hand and coaxed her softly, "Okay, I'll hold you to sleep." The little girl adjusted her posture with satisfaction and changed to her most comfortable position. Then she fell asleep in Li Yundong's arms. After a while, there was a soft and lovely snoring sound coming from her sinuses. Li Yundong looked at the little girl in his arms lovingly, and his heart was full of joy and satisfaction. He couldn't help but think of the scene when he had just been driven out of the rental house by the landlady. He had taken the little girl to live in the temporary hotel, and he had held her for the night. He had endured it for the whole night. For a moment, the smile on Li Yundong's face became more and more gentle. He couldn't help but reach out his hand and gently stroke the beautiful hair on the side of the little girl's forehead. It was as if he was guarding the most precious treasure in the world. He sat quietly on the bed by himself, not moving at all, for fear that if he moved, he would wake up the sleeping girl. Li Yundong held Su Chan in his arms and couldn't help but think of what had happened recently. He vaguely felt that danger was approaching, but this kind of danger could not be seen or touched. Even if he wanted to be on guard, what he could do was extremely limited. In particular, Li Yundong was very worried about Ziyuan. If Wang Yuanshan really died with the mystical silver fox, the blow to Ziyuan would be obvious. Li Yundong didn't even know if Ziyuan would be depressed. Although it was unlikely, Li Yundong still didn't want to see her eyes full of sadness. But if he wanted to save Wang Yuanshan, what should he do? Where should he start? If he wanted to save Wang Yuanshan, it was necessary to break the formation. If he wanted to break the formation, judging from the solemn posture of the Jingyi school, it was obvious that he was going to have a head-on conflict with them. If that was the case, the grudge between him and the Jingyi school, which had been eased with great difficulty, would really be irreconcilable. He would have to face the anger of the world's largest cultivation sect. Of course, this was not the most important or the most terrible thing. The most important and terrible thing was that if he broke the formation, no one could deal with the mystical silver fox. What should he do? No matter how conceited Li Yundong was, he didn't dare to pat his chest and say that he could definitely deal with the mystical silver fox. When he first entered the secret room of the Fox Zen school, he saw the mystical silver fox writing the heavenly Jindan technique with her bare hands on the hard granite for the first time. The shock was still fresh in Li Yundong's memory. In particular, the domineering and majestic words of the mystical silver fox really left an unforgettable impression on Li Yundong. He knew that the words were like the person. How powerful was her strength to cultivate such momentum and confidence? If Wang Yuanshan couldn't deal with her, who in the world would be a match for the mystical silver fox? Thinking about these things, Li Yundong unconsciously fell into deep thought. It was not until dawn that Su Chan woke up in a daze. As soon as she opened her eyes, she saw Li Yundong looking at her with a gentle gaze, his eyes unblinking. The little girl only felt that Li Yundong's eyes were warm, as if they were going to melt her. Although she was still a little sleepy, she still smiled sweetly and asked, "You haven't slept all night?" Li Yundong chuckled and said, "Well, I'm meditating and practicing qi." Only then did Su Chan look at herself. Her sleeping posture was almost exactly the same as before she fell asleep. She hadn't moved much. Li Yundong had held her in his arms all night. How could he meditate and practice qi? It was obvious that he was comforting her. She was moved and the smile on her face became sweeter. "You're lying. You didn't meditate and practice qi at night." Li Yundong pretended to look at Su Chan in surprise. "Goddess, you're amazing. You can see through such a lie at a glance." Su Chan giggled and said proudly, "That's right. Tell me, did you look at beautiful women all night last night?" Li Yundong smiled and pinched the tip of the little girl's nose. "Yes, you're so amazing. You even know that." The little girl laughed heartily. After laughing with Li Yundong for a while, she was keenly aware that although Li Yundong was looking at her with a smile, there was a trace of worry hidden in the corners of his eyes, as if he was full of worries. The little girl asked tentatively, "Yundong, you seem to have something on your mind?" Li Yundong smiled slightly and stroked the little girl's hair. "Why do you say that all of a sudden? What's on my mind?" Su Chan refused to believe him. She shook her head and said, "No, I can see whether you have something on your mind or not. Yundong, why don't you tell me if you have something on your mind?" As she said this, the little girl held Li Yundong's arm nervously. "Do you dislike me?" Li Yundong couldn't help laughing. "Silly girl, you only know how to think all day long. Actually, it's nothing." As he said this, he told Su Chan about what he and Ziyuan had encountered in Mount Longhu. Then he sighed and said, "Ziyuan has helped me so much. I really want to help her, but I don't know where to start." The little girl blinked and said, "If we really can't do it, why don't we sneak into Mount Longhu and break the formation?" Li Yundong shook his head and said, "Now that Mount Longhu is so heavily guarded, how can we sneak in?" Su Chan giggled. "Have you forgotten that I can use illusion spells?" As long as we cast spells nearby, I dare not say for Wang Yuanshan, but those Taoist priests who are guarding the area will definitely not be aware of it. We can sneak in without anyone noticing. Li Yundong was stunned and then his eyes lit up. Yes, how could I forget about that? But soon Li Yundong shook his head and said, but I don't know how to break the formation. The magic formation is not like other magic. If the method of breaking it is wrong, it is easy to cause a backlash. That will be bad luck. The little girl opened her mouth and thought for a moment. Suddenly she sighed and said, alas, if only Master was here. She might have a way. Well, Master is the most powerful. She must know a way. As she said this, the little girl saw Li Yundong and immediately changed her words. No, it's Master who is the most powerful, and Master who is the second most powerful. Li Yundong laughed and said, yes, I am the most powerful, but I don't know how to break the formation. The little girl made a face at Li Yundong and was about to speak when she suddenly heard a voice coming from outside. It was Zhou Qin's surprised voice. Lu Fei? President Chao, you're here? When the little girl heard this, she immediately jumped up and said in surprise, oh, they're here. I have to go out quickly. I can't let them see me here. As she said this, the little girl was about to get out of bed. Li Yundong laughed and hugged Su Chan. Stop it. Do you think that no one will know if you go out now? Why do you make it look like you're having an affair? Are you afraid that people will catch you in bed? The little girl blushed, covered her cheeks with her hands and said angrily, you're so annoying. Get out quickly. I don't want to go out. I don't want to be seen by them. As she said this, she begged and stayed on the bed, refusing to get up. Li Yundong had no choice but to freshen up a little in the bathroom in the room and go out by himself. As soon as he went out, Li Yundong saw Lu Fei standing in the living room. She was slim and graceful with light makeup on her face. Chao Kefi was standing next to her. Chao Kefi had a faint smile on her face, but her appearance and temperament were more beautiful than when he had met her before. Just standing there, there was an invisible aura that kept spreading out. Even Li Yundong, who was used to seeing beautiful women and had a firm mind, felt his heart pounding when he saw her. He was shocked by Chao Kefi's amazing beauty. Li Yundong was stunned for a moment. Lu Fei, who was next to him, pursed her lips and smiled. She nudged Chao Kefi with her elbow and said with a smile, someone is dumbfounded, Sister Chao. Chao Kefi's cheeks were slightly red. She looked at Li Yundong with some embarrassment and said, I'm sorry to have caused you trouble. Do you think I came too early? Only then did Li Yundong come to his senses. He laughed and said, it's okay. It's a pleasure to have a friend coming from afar. Have a seat. Ling Yu, go and pour some tea. What are you waiting for? Ling Yu immediately jumped up and said with a smile, okay, I'll go now. As soon as she moved, she heard someone knocking on the door again. Ling Yu giggled and said, it's really the new year. So lively. Are there magpies singing on the branches today? As she said this, she jumped to the door and opened it. She poked her head out and said with a smile, who is it? As soon as she poked her head out, she was immediately startled. She immediately stopped smiling and said in surprise, oh, it's Shi Shu. You're back. As she said this, she turned her head and shouted in surprise, Shi Shu Wushuang is back. Her voice was crisp and loud and everyone heard it. All the people of the Fox Zen school immediately rushed out. At this time, the door of Li Yundong's room was also suddenly opened. The little girl, dressed in a nightgown with messy hair, rushed to the door like a gust of wind and cried, Master, you're finally back. Chana missed you so much. Sorry, I was called out after writing 2,000 words this morning. After a busy day, I just entered the room and quickly wrote a chapter and posted it. There will be a chapter later, but it's a little late. Don't wait for me. I have to rush back to Suzhou by train tomorrow morning, so I guess I owe you another chapter in the end. What a tragedy. You're tuning in to the Han Li's Wuxia Adventures YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.